August. Things are different, but as I said, the atmosphere is good. I think things are moving in the right way, so we look forward to starting again. Obviously, very exciting days, launching the new car, and latest yesterday when I saw the car first time, you really want to get back in and drive. I think we need to be patient, and as I think Mattia also pointed out, he is in charge of the team, but it's not one person alone that is running a team. Obviously, we have a lot of people working to build these two cars. So for me, it's an honor to drive one of them, and I will do everything in my utmost to make sure we finish as high up as we can.
As he said himself, your most successful year as a team for the best part of a decade last year, but it just couldn't take it to the final step. What's going to prove the difference? What do you think that he can bring to the team and you can bring to the team? Do you think has having a new teammate changed your outlook at all?
Yeah, a lot. Obviously from the outside it looks different, but as I said, obviously Mattia has been around before, so he was doing a good job before, and I think he will continue to do a good job. So I think we have a lot of smart and clever, intelligent people on board, and they continue to do more or less the same job. Obviously, some things will shuffle around. It's clear everybody's a little bit different, but I think largely it's not. How can I say? It's not a revolution, because as Mattia has been here for 25 years, and the last years. With already great responsibilities, I think people know what to expect. People know him, so I think it's a positive because they know him. He's easy to approach, and things should settle down fairly quickly.
Final from me: your first Matt car? Is it your first Matt car that you've driven? Is that going to change the way you think about giving her a name?
I think it is, actually. First racing car. I don't know. Well, if I would give guys or boys names, Matt would be a proposal, but obviously it has to be a female, so
have a think.
I will have a think, yeah.
I've just found two drivers lurking on the pit wall here, having a close look. George, just talk us through how you're feeling ahead of your first season in Formula One. I know the car's not here right now, so that makes it difficult, but you're still here having a watch, seeing what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still really excited. Obviously, we'll never be out on track, but everybody's working as hard as possible to get it sorted, and I don't think it will compromise us too much, to be honest. You know, winter testing is one thing, but when you get racing, it's a completely different story. So I'm feeling good.
And you're here with Alex, and you two know each other very well. Are you looking forward to taking the battle onto track?
Yeah, it's good. I think it's quite interesting for us because obviously there's three of us, Lando as well. And no, I'm interested. It'll be nice to race against George and Lando again.
You've been keeping an eye on what Danny's been doing in the morning session here. What are your thoughts on your car so far?
Yeah, good. I think we're still doing mainly aero running, but no, it's going well. Just learning really. The car's looking quite good actually.
How aware are you of how much it's changed from last year? Have you been able to get that feedback from the team, and also having Red Bull on board now, having the Honda engine as well? Is that helping the team?
Yeah, to be honest, it's not like for me where I have to kind of realise what the car was like before. It's almost like it still feels very quick. It doesn't feel like I've lost any downforce in that kind of sense. But no, yeah, speaking with the team a lot, speaking with Danny as well, because obviously he has a lot of experience behind everything. So yeah, just getting up to speed as quick as I can.
How will you sleep tonight?
Yeah, I did the filming day in Misano, and even then I didn't sleep that well. So I think maybe tonight will be a little bit worse. We'll see.
You got any tips for him?
No, we're competitors now. Turn 1, 2, flat out, easy. No, like Alex said, we're nice racing each other again. We've raced each other quite a few times, and we've always seemed to be, whenever we've raced against each other, we've always actually been racing against each other. When we've had a good day or a bad day, we always have a good one together or a bad one together. So that's going to, let's hope it'll probably be the same. We'll probably be racing each other quite a lot throughout the year, but it should be good fun.
Brilliant. We'll look forward to it. Thanks very much for chatting to us, guys, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. We hopefully will see you on track very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you.
say that you feel you've started more solidly than you did 12 months ago?
Can't remember, to be honest, 12 months ago, but it feels like that. Also, if you see, the whole team, the operation, the finish of the car, the build quality, I think that has really, year after year, improved a lot, and now is the best that I've seen at Renault. So certainly progress there every year.
Yeah, we heard a lot about reduced downforce on the cars, and yet the times look comparable to last year. And you were saying the feel of the car is pretty similar too?
Yeah, I said that, and yes, that's what I found this morning. Not very dissimilar, so looks like the aero guys have done a good job and recovered a lot of the downforce.
Yeah. What about the power unit guys? We heard a lot of positive noises over the winter. Can you give us any early evidence that there's been progress there?
Yeah, that side is actually quite different. Obviously, with the much bigger rear wings and higher rear wings, wider, we have a lot more drag on the cars, and that obviously does affect the sensation of how fast you're going forward. I haven't turned up obviously everything yet, and it won't happen for a while, so it's a bit early to compare, I would say.
Do you think the new rules will help racing the way they were designed to be able to follow and so on?
Not sure. In this moment in time, it's a little bit early. This morning I felt braking zones were extremely short, and there's not much time basically, if you were to race another car, to stick your nose inside somewhere. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see a bit more.
Yeah, just finally, Ferrari seemed to be very quick out the box. 1:18.1 today is impressive. Should we all be looking at that and thinking, they look pretty good?
I don't know. It's the true answer, and at the moment I don't really care. I just care about us, and we focus on what we have to do, to get in best shape for the start of the season. And what happens with the other teams, I really don't look at too much. They're inside for a walk now.
That's it. All right. Right. Sweet. Nice to see you. You well?
quickly. Okay. Carlos, what happened?
Don't know yet. It's 1 minute ago that the car stopped, so I was just getting out, doing a practice start. I lost the drive.
What was the running like before that, though? It's been good for McLaren today so far, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a good day so far. No, I think hopefully this is not a long stop, but I must say that up until now it's been a smooth day. We haven't found any issues yet until now, as we talk. And we covered all the run plan of the morning, which on a first day, I've never done that, I think.
All right. Well, I hope it's only a short stop for you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you first of all give us your assessment of what you've seen this morning, both in terms of how your own team's got on, and I wonder, has your eye been caught by Vettel's headline time as well?
Yeah, it's always, you need to be disciplined, because we are all keen in looking at lap times, and obviously you want to be quick and on the top of the leaderboard at every single session, but it's not the purpose of the test. It's to go through all the parts that you want to look at, and look at what the data and sensor tell you. And yeah, I've seen the time. The time was very quick, 2 seconds quicker than everybody else, and definitely the Ferrari has been going strong this morning.
Mattia Binotto has said if push comes to shove this season, he'll prioritise Sebastian Vettel at his team. He has a very young driver alongside him. Why is it different, I sense, at this team?
I don't know. I think, first of all, Mattia has a tremendous task in front of him. And I believe that he wants to do it his own way. And team order is always a very controversial topic. We've discussed it last year, be it within Mercedes or at Ferrari. And coming out with that at the beginning of the season is a statement.
That's interesting. And just in general, and finally from me, one or two people have wondered how he'll get on becoming the sole responsible person in charge of that team, moving from being technical boss. Do you foresee any problems for him? And what kind of personal relationship might the two of you have, bosses of maybe the two leading teams in F1?
I've known Mattia for quite a long time, for many years as the technical director, first as the engine boss and then as the technical director, and then obviously now he stepped up to being the team principal, and I respect him. He's a very intelligent man, and knows how to maneuver his way through the paddock, and will be a force to be reckoned with, absolutely.
Next broadcaster, please.
first day of testing. Year on year, how much better equipped do you feel heading into the new year?
Yeah, I must say that this year we made a big step forward because we had much more time to work together with Honda to prepare everything in the best possible way. The integration of the power unit is much better than it was last year because the designers could go into detail and also how the electronic boxes are being placed there. The car looks really quite well designed, and I hope that we will see this in the performance as well.
Where did Honda finish last year? So what's your kind of starting position for them, and can you give us any kind of idea what progress they've made over the winter?
They made big progress over the winter from the reliability side as well as from the performance side, and it depends now how much the other power units were developed from the direct competitors. This we will see then, I don't know yet.
And in terms of disruption with regard to their ongoing development program, will that be less this year, significantly less than last year?
Well, we will see. Also, I expect that we will not meet more than the 3 engines or power units. And if it's necessary, we put in another one, because it's for the development, it's for the future, and we are ready to go for this.
A word about James Key, who's not here, who was here last year. How much is his departure felt, and do you have any control over when he starts at Mclaren?
Oh, there's nothing to say about this. As you know, currently he is employee of Toro Rosso, and what the future brings, we will see.
Brief word about your drivers. Daniel Kvyat, he was a young man when he started with you. He's been through a lot. Might he almost be better given the experiences he's had? He's had to face some adversity in his racing career. Does he come back a stronger figure?
I'm convinced about this. He was with us in the Abu Dhabi tire test, and when he came back, he immediately showed a very good performance, and if our car works, I'm convinced that Daniel can have a very, very successful season.
And what about Alex Albon? Someone we don't really know too much about, perhaps in Britain. We count him as British, even though he has a Thai license. How is he adapting?
You will know him at the end of the season because he will do very good races, he will be successful, and maybe he will become a positive surprise of the year.
Okay, and just very finally, I heard you naming some other teams. Is that the teams you expect to be racing with this year? I mean, where do Toro Rosso fit in, do you think? What kind of rough target? I know it's hard to say at this stage, but where would you like to be racing this season in amongst?
As always, in the front part of the midfield, but we are out today, the first test day, and we must see now how good is the car, what our direct opponents are doing, and then we will see. But once more, I expect us to be in the front part.
Have a good season.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
we're used to seeing them quick through this fast corner. But here comes the reigning world champion, the 5-time world champion, in fact, Lewis Hamilton, on a run in the Mercedes. Look at the sharpness of the turn in. But I'm going to say that car is still carrying quite a fat load of fuel. Now, obviously, I haven't got the timing screens out here, but he doesn't seem to be carrying as much speed through here as some of the other guys on a lighter fuel load, like that Alpha, for example. So I think at this stage, Mercedes are just trying to log the laps, get the mileage into the bank, and make sure that the car's reliable. I mean, Will, you talked about just how impressive the reliability is of these cars, and these guys are coming out here and knocking out 2 Grand Prix distances almost on the first day of testing. So it's fantastic track conditions. One issue, if we look down this straight here, that you often have at turn 9, is the wind, guys. You have this long straight down to turn 10, and sometimes when you come up this hill and turn right, you get quite a big crosswind, which pushes the cars out wide. And we saw, in fact, that Giovinazzi had a bit of a spin here, I remember, in FP1 last year, just with that crosswind. But today, absolutely beautiful conditions. It's no wind at all. Raikkonen there, great speed on the yellow sidewall, medium compound tyres. As we say, Max Verstappen now pushing on. He's backed off, giving himself a bit of a gap. But yeah, perfect testing conditions here for the first day of F1 2019 on track.
I forget the last time we had such good conditions, actually, Karun. Are you getting a good look at that Ferrari? And are they running a similar front wing to the Alpha? Can you see that from where you are?
Basically, I think that the Ferrari, the Toro Rosso and the Renault seem to have a similar-ish philosophy in terms of the end plate swoops down. Sorry, the main plane swoops down towards the end plate end. Those 5 elements there all sort of converge down. The Mercedes and the Red Bull have a similar profile on the elements to what they had last year. They maintain that height, shall we say, towards the outboard end. But certainly the Alpha is the one that's gone for the extreme case of the gap, and it's all about directing the airflow with these wider front wings. It's about directing the airflow around the front tyre and to just manage the wake and the airflow around the rest of the car. So Alpha have gone for an extreme solution. As I said, the Toro Rosso, the Renault and the Ferrari look to be something in that direction with the way the elements swoop down, but not quite as extreme. And Mercedes and Red Bull have gone standard. Now, whether we see a convergence or whether we see people doing different things as we get to Melbourne, look at that, Red Bull there, great amount of speed into this corner. The Haas with Romain Grosjean, you can see the lights flashing on the end plates. That's them harvesting the energy, the electrical energy being recharged. Lewis Hamilton, that Mercedes, still much lower rake, the rear of the car that is much lower than the Red Bull, for example, relative to the front. The Red Bull runs a huge amount of rake. If you look at it from side on, and actually down here, if I kneel down, you can see, almost at eye level, the relative rake of the cars. But when the speed builds up, the rear of the car does settle down just with the downforce, and you can still see, though, even at that speed, the Red Bull does sit much higher than the Mercedes. But that's a philosophy they've had for 3 or 4 years. It's just what works for them. And that's why, you can't just copy a front wing. They can't just look at the front wing of an Alpha and say, oh, we'll copy that onto ours, because it all has to work in conjunction with the other bits on the car.
Casey, tell me, you've been out there on track. You've seen the cars coming through the corners. Who looks good on a quick change of direction? And getting down there to turn 9, who's looking stable at the rear?
Well, to be honest, I haven't seen much of the Ferrari. Only seen a couple of laps. I think, is he still in the pits, guys? You can see
is, yes.
He is, yeah. He's not done a lot. I mean, this Red Bull, look at the speed of the turn in there. It's about aggression. Max is able to turn the wheel so aggressively. I don't know what his lap is like now, but that there looks like he's on quite a strong lap.
He's just done a personal best for the first sector, and he's only a little off in the middle sector as well.
Yeah, great amount of speed through there. And it's about that turn-in. He turns in aggressively, but the rear of the car doesn't step out of line when you go over the crest at turn 9. So that is, a strong front end with a good, stable rear end. Yeah. Well, to answer your question, earlier today, Crofty and I went out to watch the final complex. And I must say the rear end of the Ferrari, as Carlos Sainz comes past me for the first time, the rear end of the Ferrari looked very good on the change of direction through 11 and 12. Seb was able to use a lot of the curb on the left, and the car just stayed pretty rock solid, really. Didn't move around. when he went into the right-hander. So I think the Ferrari so far looks to be working. But listen, it's day 1 of 8. I think we're all getting a bit excited here to finally see race cars back on track. But it's day 1. I need to temper my excitement a little bit,
right,
because once the updates come and they start taking the fuel out, it'll all change. But for day 1, the pace is really strong, isn't it? An 18.1 already on a green track. As I say, Max doesn't quite look as committed on this lap through here as he did previous time around. But we've come to expect it, haven't we, for the last, probably decade, that the Red Bull chassis works beautifully well in the high-speed corners, and today doesn't look any different.
Doesn't it just? Right, temper your excitement, Karun Chandok, with a leisurely stroll back to the commentary box. The good news is it's all downhill from where you are. The bad news is I'll see you in 10 minutes.
All right.
And if he's out of breath, there will be trouble. Because he should have had a whole winter's training to not be out of breath on this one.
Hey, give him a break. He's a new dad.
Yeah, well,
he's probably low on sleep. And
it was hilarious. On the plane yesterday, he said, I'm so looking forward to testing. I said, me too. I haven't seen the cars for ages. He went, no, I'm going to get 8 hours sleep tonight.
Exactly.
It's brilliant. Yeah, plane got in 2 hours late.
Oh, no.
We got to the hotel last night at about 1:15.
Oh, man.
And we were up again at just after 7 this morning.
You got up after 7?
Just after 7.
Lying, mate.
There went his 8 hours sleep.
Bless him.
Are you telling me that you were up before 7 o'clock?
I was up
morning?
at 6 a.m, my
Really?
friend. Absolutely.
Well, that hair isn't going to
part-time
blow dry itself, is it now?
Well, exactly.
Right, do you want
some
more tweets from our viewers around the world?
Can't believe you're mocking my hair.
I'm not. Do you know, someone tweeted me the other day to say, is Crofty wearing a toupee? Like, for heaven's sake.
Nice.
If I was, do you think I'd go grey with the toupee? No.
This is the kind of insight that everyone's been looking for, Crofty. When they said, bring us testing coverage, this was what they wanted.
No, I was staggered. Maybe I am getting that old that people get asked that question these days. Should the teams, says Vedant Chiratka, be allowed to share data? Don't you think it's unfair to the smaller teams? Interesting question, that. Should a percentage of data from the top 3 in the championship be available to be scrutinised by the others? Or do the teams pretty much guess what's going on anyway, and by use of photographic images that they all take of the various cars, by their GPS technology, by their sound and acoustic analysis, know it without needing the data?
Do you remember when Lewis tweeted the overlay in his
Spa.
McLaren days?
Yeah.
And there was a big hoo-ha about it.
And it wasn't even the right piece of data.
No, but ultimately you've got to know what the parameters are for the data to actually mean something. So would it help? Yes. I mean, I think the biggest help would be we just reduce the amount of data that's captured, or reduce the amount of testing, or I think we've got such a good knowledge base now. What the teams do after this, after this 8 days of practice, and then 90 minutes of practice on Friday morning, 90 minutes on Friday afternoon, and then another hour on Saturday. Let's just cut it all down, cut it all back. Just throw them in a little bit more blind, so that they're having to react to everything as it happens, rather than sending them in with that much certainty. I think that would I think level it out, certainly.
Doug Amner, quick question: why don't both cars from each team take part? Mainly because the other car probably isn't built yet.
Certainly
Doug,
at Williams.
Well, the first car isn't built
Precisely.
yet at Williams. I don't think Renault have their second chassis finished yet either. It's because whilst the teams work in a real rush to get one chassis built for testing, when they start testing back at the factory,
chassis number 2 gets put together.
Yeah, and if Lewis goes much wider than that, then they'll need some running repairs to chassis number 1.
Indeed.
Quite frankly. As George Russell comfortably beat Lando Norris last year, why has Lando ended up in a seemingly better car? Well, because he was McLaren's man and George Russell was Mercedes' man, and ended up at Williams. We don't know if he's in the better car yet, because we haven't seen Williams on the track. And we won't. If you're just joining us, by the way, we won't see the Williams at all today, and probably not tomorrow as well.
Been confirmed, definitely not tomorrow.
Definitely not. The press release they put out was very unlikely. We'll give it a definitely not going to happen. Matinho says, I think Stoffel was a good driver, but there's still a disconnect of sorts between F2 and F1. Look what happens with Jolyon Palmer. Not everyone can carry it forward into F1. For some, an F2 championship may be their absolute best, and there is no next level. Don't ever think that the step up from F2 to F1 is an easy one to make.
No,
it isn't. It's a huge leap.
Well, you look at Leclerc last year, and it took him...
Leclerc?
Yeah, whatever. Took him 4 races.
Leclerc?
No, I mean, I grew up watching Hello, Hello, so it'll always be Leclerc. It is Leclerc.
No, it's Leclerc.
I know it is.
Carry on.
Took him 4 races to get his head together and to realise I can't actually change the car, I've got to change me. And as soon as he realised he had to change himself, bang, it clicked. Azerbaijan all started coming together. And I think it takes these guys quite a while to actually adapt to the differences between Formula 2 and Formula 1. But I think there is some credence to the tweet that you received. It's the Peter principle, isn't it? That everybody rises to their own level of uselessness, essentially. That you keep getting higher and higher and higher and higher until you get to the point that you are essentially useless. And you can go no further than where you're at. It's the Peter principle.
Okay. Who was Peter?
He was friends with Paul and Mary, and they had a band and sang some songs.
Seriously, you're younger than me, and you know that.
I know.
Carlos Sainz going a little wide, but 9. Karun picked.
Were they like similar to Rod, Jane, and Freddie off Rainbow, or was that different?
No, Rod, Jane, and Freddie. For those that have never seen Rod, Jane, and Freddie, were a singing group on a children's show in the UK, and I think had many hits of their own.
Did they?
That
I don't
weren't
know.
associated.
Were they just a make-believe band that turned up on Rainbow?
They lived next door to George, Zippy, Bungle, and Jeffrey.
And Jeffrey, yes indeed. Yes indeed.
I met Jeffrey once. He was a lovely man.
Was he a nice chap?
Yes, he was. Really didn't expect to be talking about Rainbow this afternoon. He was a great chap. Paint the whole world with a rainbow, they said. And Mclaren have done just that with their livery. There's a segue and a half.
Is orange part of the official rainbow?
It is part of the rainbow lexicon of Formula 1. I tell you what is part of the rainbow of Formula 1. White, yellow and red. The tyre markings for this season.
Segue. That's why you... See, that's why you're lead commentator on Sky, Crofty, because you could just pluck that from the ether and bring it front and centre. That's beautiful.
And not only that, we can talk more tyres with Pirelli's lead tyre man, Mario Isla. He's down with Rachel now.
We're talking tyres, we're talking C1 to C5. We're all trying to get our heads around it. Can you just explain to us in sort of simple terms for us for this season what we're looking at out on track? I know when a quick lap goes in, we all run to the window of the media centre to see what tyres the drivers are on.
The first point is that during the test they have all the compounds available. That's why it's a bit more complicated. But during races they will have only the 3 we select, and they will be white, yellow and red. So should be easier, but obviously we want to give you the information on which are the compounds that we are selecting for each race. And that's why we have called them with C compound plus a number. C1 is the hardest, C5 is the softest. They are the 5 compounds we have homologated this year, and we make the usual selection based on type of circuit, weather conditions and so on. Nothing new compared to last year, but during the race you can focus just on the 3 colors and the 3 compounds we are using.
So we've lost the super soft and the super hard, I guess, from what we would have seen last year. But we have the yellow with the walls or with the stripes in between the lettering, and we have the white with the stripes in between, and we have the red with the stripes in between. The yellow, there's just one yellow tyre.
No, but this is just for the test because, as I said,
when we get to races, we'll only be looking out for one colour.
Yes. The hardest that we have at the test is without the brackets, and the softest is without the brackets, just to make them recognizable using all the 5. But it's not something that is going to happen during the races. You are right, we reduced from 7 to 5 the number of compounds. The super soft was a bit too close to the soft and the ultra. That's why we say that we have basically eliminated the super soft, and the super hard was just a backup we never used.
What have you seen from this morning's running so far? I know it's very early. We only had half a day's worth of running, but have the teams given you any feedback yet?
Not really. We are interested to understand how the new aero package is working, because that's making a difference in the way they are stressing the tire. We made some changes in the construction of the compounds in order to reduce the overheating, to reduce the blistering, and that was our job last year in developing the new tires. Now there is also a different aero package, and we need to understand how it works together with the tires. This morning making conclusion is a bit too early, too difficult, but at least I can say the weather is good, and the weather forecast for all the 2 sessions is good. During midday and early afternoon we have a good weather condition, like 18 degrees ambient, so good to have a representative test.
No snow this year. And what about between now and Australia? If the teams come back and the feedback is, listen, this is way too hard, or this is blistering too quickly, what can you do between now and Australia? Do you have time to change the compounds at all?
Not really, because we cannot change by regulation the construction of the compounds, and we don't want to change after testing. But we have the experience from last year, we have the experience here. You remember we had a lot of blister due to the new surface, the new tarmac. This year the tarmac is different, because usually when you resurface a track there is a big evolution in the first year or 2 years, and we have measured the roughness 2 days ago, and it's rougher than the race last year and a lot more than the test, so it should be in line with our expectations.
Fantastic, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Rachel, as Hamilton comes into the pits at the end of his stint. Right, so let's just cover off a little bit of tyre chat for you this afternoon. Like it or not, tyres are important. Like it or not, the teams spend an awful lot of time, and certainly will over the next 7 days and 2 hours of testing, be trying to understand what these tyres are doing. So, you have your softest compound for testing, your C5, with just the Pirelli logo on it and no band around the outside. Then your soft has got the red band around it. Did you just say Sinclair C5? Yes, you did. Someone in my ears was coming up. It's not like the Sinclair C5. It goes an awful lot faster, and there are 4 of those wheels on there, not the 3 that were on the C5. The medium has the yellow, the hard has the white stripe, and the hardest has the Pirelli logo. Right. It'll get, as Rachel found out, easier for each race.
Shame you didn't say C4, because I was going to ask if they blew up.
Very good. I could say C3 in a minute, and you'll say PO.
And then the white stripes, we'll make some witty jape about the band.
Here's the important bit, though, I think, for the drivers this year. 80 degrees centigrade for the rear tyres in terms of the degrees centigrade that the tyre blankets can have as their maximum temperature. 100 degrees at the front. So it's kind of been reduced a bit, I think, at the rear.
Romain Grosjean's already been complaining about that today. Says that when they go out, the tyres are not at an operating temperature. So, and I think that's what we saw with Kimi this morning spinning off the track.
Yeah. Well, they are, just not at the operating temperature they used to.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're warm, they're just not, there's not as much grip, because they're not as warm as they would like them to be. And I think certainly that's what caught Kimi out this morning.
Now, I'm just going to be a bit bold, because we're making bold predictions here.
Right.
I'm all for that. Yeah. And in fact, as a non-driver here, I'm all for tyre blankets being removed from the sport altogether.
Absolutely, with you on that.
If you remember the first US Grand Prix in Austin, where it was very cold conditions, tyres were very hard and conservative for that weekend. Was it 2012, wasn't it?
Something like that.
And drivers really struggled for 6 or 7 laps to bring the tyres up to a temperature where they got the grip, and they were sliding around all over the place. It was quite difficult to drive, and it looked really exciting actually to watch, because the drivers were being tested.
And I think that's ultimately what everybody wants to see, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you know, if you overworked those tyres, then you blistered them, and you know, your day was toast. Yeah, no, look, I think the challenge element has to be there. Is the challenge, though, of maintaining one set of tyres what everybody wants to see. I think we have to be careful with what is the challenge that we want to be portraying. What is the challenge that excites and entertains? Is it looking after tyres, or is it the challenge of a, you know, massively powerful car that makes it look like these guys are riding a tiger, you know, and trying to keep it under control? I think that is more what people get excited about.
Here's an idea. You've got 3 compounds of tyre, hard, medium, soft. You've got to use every single one of them in the race.
Love it. Do it. Fine.
Easy.
Okay, simple.
That'll be the C4 going on to the McLaren there.
Kaboom!
Said without a hint of irony from me, but it's got the white band around it.
We got a really nice little close-up there on what McLaren have done in between the front wheel and the side pod. There's so much detailing in that box where you're allowed to develop, and they've gone for a very novel approach in there. You see all the turning vanes, all of the wings around where you've got to have a much smaller, much lower barge board setup this year. And McLaren have really exploited that part between the front wheel and the side pod. We were talking about it earlier in the day with Sam Collins from Race Car Engineering, and he said that the McLaren is actually one of the cars that excites him the most, because when they got rid of their top level designers, they've had all these young guys who for years have wanted the opportunity to really go for it, and they've designed what could be, I mean, it's quite a revolutionary car, and if it works, you know, it could be a great car for McLaren.
Back to the tyres again, thinner treads. We had them at Silverstone last year, and there was a bit of disquiet from some quarters, but then those quarters said, actually, no, we needed that, to be honest, and it was right to go with them. Well, thinner treads at all of the races, a new intermediate tyre and a new wet tyre as well, with wider working ranges for all of the dry tyres. That's as much tyre chat as I can handle for the moment. So let's head down to, I think, Craig Slater, who's with Christian Horner.
Hello.
Christian, can we start with you? That would be great.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. And how did your day go today? How did you assess how you got on?
We're still going. So, yeah, it's been a positive start. The car's done more than 80 laps so far, still with more than an hour to run. And, yeah, it's all about learning about this new RB15 chassis.
That Sebastian Vettel lap, did that catch your eye at all? I mean, he's a second and a bit quicker than everyone else at this stage. Does that mean anything at all?
How many winter tests you been to now?
A lot. Yeah, I know, but it's an unusual lap.
You get sucked in on the first day.
I'm trying to suck
every
others
time.
in.
Yeah, it's a quick time that he's done. But of course, what you don't know again in winter testing is the fuel levels, the energy levels that they're running. Obviously, he was on a slightly softer tyre compound, but it's good to see, you know, the new cars running that quick, because everybody predicted that the new aerodynamics would slow them significantly. You can see from that lap time, it hasn't.
That is good. How about the Honda engine? How quick is that running in? And what's your best estimate for how it might advance you, hopefully, this season?
Well, it's running, running well at the moment. It's been running, problem-free. We're just learning about the engine, the procedures, how it works compared to what we've had previously, and it's a very good starting point. So, the installation looks great. It's beautifully integrated into the car, and we're hopefully going to see exciting progress through the year.
Yeah, just finally from me, I don't know if you're aware, you probably aren't, but Toto Wolff's made some strong remarks about Brexit and F1, saying that it's really harmful potentially for his team, and maybe hands an advantage to the continental-based teams like Ferrari and Alfa Romeo. From your view, if there was a hard Brexit, would it harm your chances? What sort of stance do Red Bull taking it on?
Well, Brexit, I think, is confusing for everybody. But do you understand what it is? Of course, we do all the due diligence to take countermeasures should they be needed. But I think everybody just needs to know, what it is and what it's going to be. So I think the sooner we get on with it, deal, no deal, whatever it is, we'll deal with it.
Well, listen, I hope your car's the real deal this season. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much, Christian Horner there. And just to expand slightly on what I was saying there to Christian Horner, Toto Wolff saying in his news conference in a written media briefing that Brexit potentially could have real issues for Formula One teams based in this country, because it won't be so easy to move people and in particular parts in and out to races on the European leg of the circuit in particular. And he was saying if there was a hard Brexit, that really might advantage Ferrari in this year's title race.
Yeah, thanks ever so much for that, Craig. It's a subject I think that will crop up more and more as we get closer to the Brexit deadline and the deal or no deal that is given. I know you devote a lot of your social media usage time, Will, to the subject of Brexit, so I'm not going to discuss the rights or the wrongs on it.
I wouldn't.
However,
I wouldn't dream of doing that.
Formula One is a sport that actually could get very affected, especially if there is a no deal.
I mean, this is the problem, I think, that potentially stands in, as Craig so excellently pointed out from what Toto had said earlier, which is that, let's say there is a no deal and there are then the question marks that are raised over customs, export. If you are, let's say,
Renault,
and you are based in Enstone, you are a European company, but you are based in Enstone in the UK. Let's say we're here for the Spanish Grand Prix back later this season, post-Brexit, no-deal Brexit. You need that part for your car. Nico Hulkenberg biffs it in FP1, needs a new floor, right? Needs to get it sent out.
Exactly.
If there is no customs arrangement, how does that happen? And that's the thing, is there is no answer. And without there being an answer, how can the teams prepare? And if, you've got all the scare stories about food going off and whatever, and 20-mile queues to get to the thing to Calais, to Dover, and then, to ship it over to Calais. If that happens, if that exists, if there is that 20-mile tailback and you can't get it shipped over, how long is a Renault going to stay in the UK? How long is a Mercedes going to stay in the UK? How long would any of them bother to do that without shipping their workforce, their whole operation, out onto the continent?
Well, I'm glad we're focusing on Renault at the moment, because their engine facility is based at Viry-Châtillon.
Is in Paris.
In Paris. Their factory is at Enstone in Oxfordshire. At least Mercedes have HPP based in this country.
Well, that means they can get their car built perfectly well in the UK, but can they get it out?
Well,
and that's the question, and no one's got an answer.
I don't know the answer, and Ferrari, of course, with engine and car manufacturing taking place in Italy, might be at a little less of a disadvantage. Toro Rosso might have a huge disadvantage, given that they have their factory in Faenza, they have their engine facility with Honda in Milton Keynes, and of course they've got the design office based at Banbury. Will, thank you very much indeed.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Crofty.
You're dismissed for the time being.
Thanks, sir.
You've got to go and interview Christian Horner, I'm told.
No, I missed him, but I'm going to go and talk to Otmar.
Otmar Safnauer, the team principal.
Yes, indeed.
At Racing Point. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure, mate.
And we will carry on with our coverage here right until the last car leaves the track and then beyond, with Rachel Brooks hosting the review show in the paddock that Karun Chandok and myself will be popping along to as well. And I'm sure we'll have even more to talk about than we have already been talking about this afternoon. Karun is back with us. I've given him at least 5 minutes to catch his breath. He didn't need it. How was it out there?
Well, it's nice. As I was saying earlier while I was out there, the weather conditions are absolutely perfect for testing. I mean, these are the days which, as a racing driver, I used to really wait for. No wind, just blue skies, perfect track temperature. And what it really helps the teams and drivers do is go lap after lap with consistent conditions. Otherwise, and Barcelona is one of those tracks which is really bad for it, because the conditions, the wind often used to pick up at lunchtime, which meant that the data you would get, or the information, or the feeling as a driver, it's about feel ultimately in the cockpit. The engineers look at data, but as a driver, it's feel in the cockpit. And the feeling you'd get in the afternoon would be different to the morning sometimes, just because of the wind. And you'd suddenly leave yourself with question marks about, well, we've tried a new front wing setting, but through turn 9 it doesn't feel as good. But is that because the wind is now pushing me wide, or is that because of the wing is not as good? And it would leave you with some question marks. Whereas today, this is absolutely ideal conditions for these cars and drivers to have a good baseline reading of where they're at.
So Daniel Ricciardo enjoying the best of the conditions. Only 29 laps completed today for him. His teammate Nico Hulkenberg did put 65 in this morning. Carlos Sainz from McLaren, 79 laps so far. He's out on track at the moment. Lewis Hamilton has put in 40 laps so far. Valtteri Bottas, 69 this morning. 30 laps for Romain Grosjean and for Sergio Perez. Danny Kvyat's put in 50 laps. Max Verstappen 88, Kimi Räikkönen 85, and Sebastian Vettel 129 laps and counting. One team not taking to the track today, and that's Williams. Rosanna Tennant is outside their garage.
On the floor, you can see some dots, and that marks out exactly where the pads would go, where the mechanics would be able to weigh the car, get all the information that they need before sending it out on track. So the dots are here in the garage, and then they use the same template here in the garage, out here in the pit box. And as you can see, the Williams mechanics obviously need a little bit of things to do this afternoon, keep them busy. They've laid out the template here in the pit lane. You can see the dots, the holes there. That's how they managed it out in the garage. And then everything is so precise here in Formula One. I'm going to take the plan off you. Thank you very much. Look at that. Constructed on CAD. This is the same plan that they use in the garage and in the pit box. And we've got lots of sticky tape. We've got sticky tape here. We've got measurer, all sorts here. This will all go onto the ground here in the pit lane. And you can see a little bit further up Alfa Romeo's pit box. Soon, this is what the Williams pit box will look like. But they don't have to rush, because as we know, they're not going to be going out today or tomorrow, Crofty.
Absolutely. Thanks ever so much. Big disappointment, Rosanna. Can you hear me, Rosanna? I don't know if you can or not.
I can hear you, Crofty.
Excellent.
Loud and clear.
If you're allowed to, pop along to Racing Point's garage and have a look at their new light display above the car, because it is fairly unique, and it's a concept that's not been tried out by any other team. And you'll see why as soon as you see it.
I'm still getting used to Racing Point. Now I'm getting used to Racing Dot, but I will go and have a look for you.
Just race. That's all you have to do. Just race. Thanks, Rosanna. I want to talk about that because there is a reason why they've done it as well. And it does look rather splendid, but they've got to be allowed into the garage, and I'm not sure with Sergio Perez in the pits at the moment they're going to be allowed to do that. Someone's coming into the pits, and it is the McLaren of Carlos Sainz, who are getting more and more miles on the clock. 80 so far, as are Mercedes. Whatever happens from here on in, you get the feeling Mercedes are not going to catch Ferrari in terms of the amount of laps completed today, Karun. So, and we're not going to talk lap times, but first blood in terms of just pounding and round and getting the mileage in to Ferrari. And I think it's important this season for Ferrari to take that, bragging rights on the first day.
Yeah, I mean, they need something, don't they? And also, I think the pace has been very consistent. Vettel is just knocking in those low 1 minute 22s, in a very Germanic, metronomic way. It's just 22.3, 22.4, 22.1. He's just hammering them in. I contrast that with Ricciardo, who was down in the 121s to start with, but he's now drifted up into the 124s, and I'd be fascinated to see what his honest feeling is at the end of today. And when I say honest feeling, I don't mean what he's going to stand in front of the cameras and say, but I'd love to know what he says when he, gets on the phone to his dad Joe and says, how was your, when dad goes, how was your first day, son? and they have a very close relationship, and Joe, he's been around racing a long time, and that's when the honesty comes out. And that, it'll be fascinating to see his honest thoughts on it, because he's gone from a car which was arguably the best chassis on the grid to one which is, been a second and a half, 2 seconds off.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Renault have made progress over the winter, no question about it. But how much is the question that we'll only be able to answer, I think, after the first 4 races. I think it's, and we talked about earlier, but for those who've just joined our coverage of testing here as we head to the last 90 minutes, Crofty and I were talking about how you really shouldn't judge things based on just Melbourne or just testing. You need to look at the first 4 races, especially because of the first 4 that are chosen. You got a bumpy street track with strange cambers in the road in Melbourne. You've got a real limited circuit with some very odd track temperatures, where certain cars just hit the sweet spot at the right time. Look at Pierre Gasly last year in the Toro Rosso.
Absolutely.
Then you got China, a very, very front-limited circuit. One of only 2 that are really front-limited, along with Paul Ricard. And then we go to Baku, which is just a wild and wacky street circuit with a really long straight. So I think you kind of have to take all 4 of those races as a singular unit, and then judge the pecking order, and sort of average it across those 4.
And then you come to Barcelona, where we should all judge it in Barcelona, really, because that's with the new upgrades. It's an aero-efficient circuit. If it works well here, it should work well absolutely everywhere. Right. Let's read out some tweets here. People getting very hot under the collar about Brexit. Not surprised, really. We're just trying to take the
I'm
sporting
staying away
angle.
from that subject.
Just trying to take the sporting angle. In a fast-moving sport, how do you move things across borders after Brexit? Is it possible? Can it happen?
Are you asking me?
Well,
because I don't have the answer.
No, that's the question I think that's being posed a little bit on that one.
Right, yeah.
Right. In which case, what are your thoughts on the new tyre marker things that Mclaren are using rather than on the engineers' arms? They've got, I think that's for their pit stops. Anything that appears at a pit stop or on a gantry has been tested out at the factory, where they've all got their own rigs for pit stop practice, and it only appears if it's been proved to have worked within the factory on that one. Is my thoughts on that. Otherwise, no, not quite sure, to be fair. What else have we got? Why have Williams brought the 2018 car, says Ned? Could they why haven't Williams, I think I should say, brought the 2018 car? Could they possibly run it similar to Force India previously, so from last year? There's so many changes from last year to this year. I don't think they can they?
I don't think Force India ran the 2018 car, so I'm not quite sure where his question comes from, because, they showed it off at the Toronto Motor Show, which obviously David was
at.
I
think he means last year. Sorry, the 2017 car at the start of the 2018 testing.
Yeah, but you didn't have a regulation change between 17 and 18. You only had the halo. So that's the difference.
I just don't think they could. Neil Penny, why does Renault have red wheel nuts on one side of the car and green on the other? Just spotted it whilst watching the testing program. It's a great spot there, Neil, if you have.
I think it could just be an easy way for mechanics to identify which are the lefts and the rights. So they, if you've got a last-minute strategic change, for example, you look at what happened with Daniel in Monaco a couple of years ago when he was leading, and you just don't get mixed up between the lefts and the rights. I think it might just simplify it a little bit for them.
I've never been a fan of the matte finished paints, especially when racing at night, says Andrew Deakin. The Ferrari should also go back to gold wheel rims. Always looked amazing, the red and the gold. Now, because Karun and I have amazingly interesting conversations, we've been talking wheel rims.
We have
already today.
And there's a car on screen that we were talking about. Because, exactly. I noticed Mercedes have gone back to the controversial rear wheel rim. So it's got 2 things in there which are quite different from the Ferrari. One is, you'll see in that shot, they're black, which is, we believe, to absorb the heat from the tyre a bit more. But also they've got these sort of bubbles on the inside of them, a bit like an orange squeezer, I guess, Crofty, is the way to describe it without being able to see it in detail. And again, it's all to do with having a bigger surface area on the inside of the rim to dissipate the heat. So the more of the rim you've got, and they believe the black paint as well, that would pull the heat away from the tyre into the rim, and that just helps them manage the rear tyre temperatures. Now, the reason they do it is one of the issues with the Pirellis, which we didn't have with Bridgestone or Michelin before this, is that they suffer from thermal degradation rather than wear. Thermal degradation in simplistic terms, meaning the tyres get too hot, and therefore you suffer with the lack of performance because of that heat build-up, rather than actual wear, which is what used to be the case with the Bridgestone. So it's very rare these days in the Pirelli era that we actually have a race where they suffer with tyre wear. It's actually to do with thermal deg.
Yeah.
And therefore anything that the teams can do to remove heat from the tyre and therefore soak it into the rim is of benefit. And Mercedes controversially introduced it, I think it was in Spa last year, towards the back end of last year.
Yeah.
And there's a big discussion about it. Ferrari were not happy about it. But I noticed, I think Mclaren have introduced it this season as well. And to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that neither Red Bull or Ferrari have introduced it yet. And I use the word yet carefully
It's
because
only day one.
I'll be interested to see what comes out between now and Melbourne. But certainly Mercedes last year believed there was a benefit, which is why they've brought it in. And it's not easy to do. It's not cheap to do. It's a whole load of wheel rims need to be produced.
Yeah.
And a lot of time and planning and investment in that. So, interested to see if people like Red Bull and Ferrari, who have the resources to do it, are able to copy them.
But with the wheel rims, running the black wheel rims that, like McLaren are, that are absorbing the heat and therefore taking heat away from the tyre, why are Haas and Ferrari not doing it? Do they feel they haven't got a problem with rear tyre wear, therefore it's not an issue for them?
Well, it's an interesting point, because the other thing I notice on the Mercedes is that the rear suspension now, the top wishbone, is got a similar way of being mounted as the Ferrari last year and this year. And I think one of the things last year we noticed is that Ferrari were better when it came to rear tyre management, and perhaps Mercedes have looked at it. And this is not something that they would decide and do without a long lead time. They look at the Ferrari and they go, "Ooh, that looks interesting." First you look at the weaknesses or the strengths. You go, Ferrari seem better at rear tyre management. So what are they doing that we're not? Ooh, actually the rear suspension's a little bit different. Ooh, let's simulate that. Let's put it in. Let's give it to our vehicle dynamics guys. They can run it on the 7-post rig. They can run it in the on the simulation software that they have back at home with the different geometries. Then they'll put it in the simulator. And you'd have people like Anthony Davidson evaluating it. And if they feel that it is better, then it goes to design, then it goes to production, then it goes to be crack tested, and then finally put on the car. So it's a long lead time between thinking, ooh, that's an idea we should get inspiration from, till we actually get on the car. But they have put it on the car this year, I noticed. So, this is all part of the gamesmanship in F1, isn't it? They look at bits of inspiration from other teams and then make their own versions of it.
So with that example that you've given there, let's just briefly discuss Williams, because we didn't really get a chance earlier. With such a long lead time for design, simulation, production, testing on the simulator and through CFD, and then finally getting to build the car, at what stage should Williams have been aware that there might have been an issue with getting their car ready for this first test? Because it's a very long way out that you start thinking about these things. And what surprises me, given that very long way out, there hasn't been a red flag waving somewhere at Grove to say, guys, I don't think we're going to be ready, and then a solution to be found in good time.
I think it's an excellent question for Paddy Lowe, frankly, and people at Williams, because that's something that neither you or I can answer. I think that the concept for the way a car is laid out starts probably 14, 15 months ago. From today. And then once you go through the initial, once you go through the concept, then I'm talking about concepts for 2019 would have been started before 2018 season started.
Exactly.
It's a long time ago. Some of the rules weren't defined, which is where it got a bit complicated, because one of the technical directors was saying to me that even as late as October last year, there was still bits, they'd go to a technical working group meeting and discussions were going on about the wings still. And they'd call their design office and say, that wing we've been designing and simulating on CFD for the last 3 weeks, tear it up because it's changing. So, some of those rule changes have made life more complex for people, and we can see last year's Williams there in their current livery. So, I think, some of the planning has been compromised by these regulation changes. However, that's where the planning and procurement and design office and manufacturing and NDT testing, they all got to work together to rally and get the cars out, because guess what? Time takes over and the dates don't change. And, I think, and I don't know if they had planned a scheduled shakedown like all the other teams had done. A lot of teams came into the shakedown here in Barcelona over the weekend.
Yeah.
and I don't know if Williams were aiming for that.
Which makes sense because they combine it with a filming day, and then everything gets done on the same day.
Exactly. But, the planning happens so far in advance. I think, to answer your question, at which point did they think, we might not make it on Monday, is a question really to put to someone at Williams.
Yeah, which we would put to Paddy Lowe today, but I don't think he's here today, and we're hoping he'll be here tomorrow, just so we can actually get an understanding of where the problems kind of first surfaced. Now, obviously, some cars don't make it to the first test. Famously, the Brawn car in 2009, 10 years since Brawn had their one and only season in Formula One, didn't make it to the first test, came to the second test. Half of Brackley seemed to realise it was fairly quick and then made a fair bit of money by having a bet or two on it, and it went on to win a World Championship. So maybe the omens are good for Williams there.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened before, hasn't it? Think, you go back, 11 years before that. Actually, it's 21 years before that. and in 1988, Ferrari were looking pretty good in winter testing, and they thought they had a competitive car there with Gerhard Berger and Michele Alboreto, and all of a sudden this McLaren arrived and bang, Prost and Senna won 15 out of 16 races with the MP44, and it was a similar thing. They showed up at Imola at the final test and just blitzed the opposition. Now, Williams would dearly love for that to happen. Daniel Kvyat, by the way, in the Toro Rosso has just set a personal best lap to go fourth fastest on his, I suppose, his first official day, although he did Abu Dhabi the end of last season, but his first official day back as a race driver in F1.
Yeah, I think we can say that.
Can we say that? I think we can say that.
Yeah, the Abu Dhabi test, I always think, is more a test at the end of the 2018 season,
I agree,
so to speak.
Yeah.
They're not running the 2019 cars.
Yeah.
They might run 2019 tyres, but they're not running 2019 cars. Look, Will and I were having this chat. I think it's great to see Daniel Kvyat back again, and he's a man that didn't want to leave F1 the first time around, or even the second time around.
He is the luckiest bloke on the planet, and I hope he knows that, and I hope he makes use of it. Because honestly, in all seriousness, not many young drivers get 3 opportunities with the Red Bull program, and he's found himself in a situation where he's been in the right place at the right time and been able to get these opportunities, and he's got to make use of it. This, it's really strange, Crofty, isn't it? Because I remember back when I was on the Red Bull program, 2007-8, there was an army of drivers that you were all fighting for it. My first drive ever in a Formula One car was here in Barcelona. I came in testing at the end of 2007, and you were fighting for a day of testing with all sorts of drivers. You had Robert Wickens, you had Michaela Leshin, at that time there was Buemi, there was myself, there was Michael Ammermuller, there was a whole load of us. We're all fighting to get a day here or there, and all of a sudden, Helmut has gone from this army to just having a handful of drivers, and then has ended up in the situation where he didn't have a driver that on his scheme to plug in.
If Dan Ticktum had enough points on his super license, would he have got the nod?
Yes.
I wonder.
Yes, I think so, is the short answer.
Yeah.
But he didn't, so he didn't. And that's the simple end of that discussion, really. So, Kvyat's ended up in a situation where he's, as I said, been in the right place at the right time. He's got to make use of this opportunity. Just looking at his tyres, by the way, as he comes out of the final corner, I think this is the first car we've seen on the soft compound tyres.
On the C2.
Which is why, perhaps, he's done his personal best times to jump up to P4. So I don't think we've seen anyone else go down to that end of the tyre range.
No, I think you're right. It is roundabout now is where we should be seeing. If they've done enough simulations or enough of a simulation this afternoon for whatever race sim they were trying to achieve, now we might see a few of the softer tyres coming out. So that might skew that 1.19.6 and make it look a little more competitive at this stage than it actually is. Either way, 1:19.6.
Yeah.
Good to see the Toro Rosso up there. That is the second softest tyre compound that Danny Kvyat is running there.
And one of the challenges of testing, and this is something that I will end up spending my weekend doing, much to the I'll probably greatly upset my wife, but I will spend most of this weekend trying to analyze the difference between the tires and the different compounds. You know, how much is the step between all the 5 compounds we got here in the range, and then you try and extrapolate a picture of using the length of the stint, so you get the amount of fuel they've used. You take the tire compound they've used, and also the time of the day, and I try and use all those 3 ingredients to try and draw a picture of the pecking order. And that's something we can't sit here and say today, because the tyres are different. You know, we could look at it and go, well, last year it was about 7/10 between, you know, the red and the yellow. So if it's about the same this year, then that's what it'll be. But we can't do that.
No, we can't, because they're a different compound from last year.
Yeah, different range completely.
Yeah.
So
the soft is harder than the soft was last year. So the soft might be like a soft medium.
Yeah,
as it were.
Exactly. So it's way too complex and frankly quite dull for us to spend the next 80 minutes talking about.
I've got a great idea. So you do all that work. I'll just take.
I'll send you an email.
You phone me up when you're ready to send that email.
Yeah.
And I'll send you an email back again at exactly the same time. Yeah,
okay.
FaceTime me so you know.
Okay.
And then we'll see what your pecking order is compared to mine. And I'll just employ crofty guesswork.
Okay.
And you do all the analysis.
All right.
See if that works. Craig Harris, by the way, says, first time hearing Karun Chandok as a commentator, analysis presenter. Excellent work. Lots of informative and technical info. Great addition to the Sky Sports team. Karun's on board for this year. And we are very happy to have him with us for many, many reasons other than his great technical insight. Last night I thought the trance that you had under the car was most enlightening.
You're also looking forward to the curry I'm about to cook you when we get to the British Grand Prix weekend, isn't it?
Are you doing Karun's curry night?
I think we should do Karun's curry night, shouldn't we?
Well, why are you cooking? Why don't we just go down to
we can go
to your place in Brackley?
We can go to the place in Brackley.
Where we can have the Karun Chandok menu and the crofty naan.
And the crofty naan.
It's on there.
And the Checo Fiesta.
The Checo Fiesta. He's still selling the crofty naan as well. Bless him. Right. What are the best lap times for the drivers on these long race simulation runs, says Tolga Hassan. I think we were getting down to the very low 121s we were seeing from
Lewis has just done.
and Vettel, and Hamilton's just done, as you say, 121.5. I don't think the Mercedes was getting down quite as low.
Yeah,
to be honest.
At this moment, it's very hard for me to actually tell how many laps he's done on this particular stint. So, again, this is sort of analysis we're able to look at later in the day when we get the full timing information. But generally, the pace from certainly Vettel, I know Vettel did a 22.1 on his 16th lap of a stint earlier today, and I saw Lewis doing a load of laps in the mid to low 122s earlier.
Here's a great tyre question from Sky Simpson. Could Mercedes end up taking too much heat out of their tyres if both their suspension geometry and wheel rims work really well, and actually go the opposite way, say during a restart or at the beginning of a race, and actually hurt themselves? Is there a danger that in trying to protect the tyre life, they get too cold?
No, I don't think so, because it's to put temperature into the rear tyres is not difficult, because, well, Formula 1 cars are rear-wheel drive, and you've got a lot of power that you can put through the rear axle, and therefore put a lot of energy through the rear. So, yes, on a restart, occasionally it can get tricky, but really the big issue comes from, on a restart, on the front axle, is trying to get the front tyres up to temperature rather than the rears. So you often see drivers struggling with understeer and front-end grip rather than the rear end.
Do you think, says Nicky Scarning, that teams will use the extra 5 kilos of fuel they're allowed to this year, or will they focus on less fuel and weight saving instead? I think Lewis was asked about this last year, and contrary to pretty much every other driver who was asked that day, he said no, it's going to make no difference whatsoever.
I think it won't make any difference to them, because Mercedes spent most of last year running under that limit.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Efficient engine.
Yeah. But I think to this Toro Rosso, for example, the Honda power unit, I think, last year Honda still didn't have the fuel efficiency of the Mercedes and Ferrari, and there were certain races where they were doing a lot of coasting. The Haas last year, Kevin Magnussen was often talking about having to do a lot of coasting. So I think the Mercedes has been the most fuel efficient, but there are some races, Singapore, Sochi, Bahrain even comes to mind, where they're a little bit on the edge with fuel. So
in Baku as well, I think there's a lot of slow corners in Baku.
Yeah, but I think we should make the point that it's a huge effect. It's not just 5 kilos at the start of the race, because that's a 5 kilos that you'll carry all the way through.
Yeah.
So that's worth about 0.17 per lap. That's 0.17 per lap across the whole race.
So it could be about 12 seconds for the whole race.
And if you think about it, Crofty, though, a front wing update, if a team found 0.17 on a front wing update, they'd be overjoyed with that update. So, and they'd spend an awful lot of money doing it. So, we can't belittle the effect of of a fuel efficient engine, and therefore a team that can carry 5 kilos less fuel is gaining, as you say, 12 seconds across the race. It's a huge amount in F1 terms.
This is the fastest man on the day so far, Sebastian Vettel, the only man into the 1:18s. He is on his 139th lap at the moment, and we can head down to the pits. Rosanna, where are you?
Crofty, I am having the best time investigating the pit lane. I've come down to the Mclaren pit box because I'm sure lots of you have spotted it, but McLaren are the only ones to have special markers for their drivers. You can see there the green arrows pointing down towards where the front axles would be during a pit stop. And of course, the Formula One driver doesn't want to be looking down onto the ground to find out where they need to stop. So these are great points of reference for the driver, and they are activated by this button on this little device here, which McLaren have given me. So I'm going to have a go. When I push it, they should flick up like that. Nearly took Bob's eyes out. They then go up. Got a one-eyed cameraman now. They then go up out of the way of the car so that the driver can exit the pit box if, and of course in Formula One these things don't fail, but if they failed, they are designed to flip forward as well so that the car could head out without any problem. And then up here, there's a little release lever that you can pull and bring it right back down so it's ready for another pit stop. So I'm having a lovely time down here, Crofty and Karun. I hope you're enjoying the commentary box, but it's more fun in the pit lane.
But it's typical F1, isn't it? Let's see how complicated we can make something.
I'm not a fan of things that kind of flap down like that. Thanks ever so much, Rosanna. The commentary box, by the way, beautifully warm. And now that the sun has kind of gone right behind our back wall, we can see again. We were being dazzled for a while. Lewis says, can you ask Karun how his tennis is coming along?
Well, basically, I'm on a mission to restart playing tennis after 25 years. I last played when I was a 10-year-old or something, because I think basically I'm trying to find any form of sport that my son can get involved with, which doesn't involve motor racing and a lot of money. So
you're not going to avoid that.
Well, race engineer, he could be a race engineer. It's got to be cheaper for Dad, isn't it?
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? So your dad is like Mr. Motorsport in India. Yeah, he currently head of the FIA in India.
He's taken a step back. He's actually head of the Asia Pacific Rally Championship now.
Well, there you go, and was very much instrumental in bringing the Grand Prix to India as well. You grew up in a motorsport family. Yeah, your brother went and played cricket. You decided you weren't very good with a bat. You go and be a racing driver instead. Your dad didn't stop you doing that, did you? No, because he loved you and he wanted you to have the best. You are now saying that you don't want your firstborn son here to have the very best opportunity. I'm appalled.
I tell you, the pain involved with trying to get to Formula One is monumental. And any racing driver, it doesn't matter whether you've driven at the top or the bottom, will tell you that. It's a decade, it's a lifetime of commitment, really, and it's a lifetime of sacrifice and money involved and stuff. So, you want to try and take the pain away from everyone if you can. But listen, if he turns it out and says he wants to be a racing driver, the problem is also, Crofty, frankly, I think I'd be quite a bad racing driver, Dad. I'd be standing there shouting that he's not braking late enough for the first corner, or he's not going quick enough for the high speed. I will be there, I manage some young drivers, and I manage some, and it's more than one occasion I've had them in tears because I'm quite hard.
You wait until he beats you at karting.
Oh, I know.
You go karting, as has happened to me already.
I'm taking the Anthony Davidson model of trying to make them into race engineers, because I think that's just tremendous. He's done well, and he's sort of drilled into his boy's head that being a race engineer is the thing to do, and I think that's tremendous.
So with this chat, let us develop it out a little further from our own woes to a man who has spent a lot of money on his son's racing career, and his son has been on the podium in Formula One. His son's been on the front row, has shown that he is more than adept at handling himself in Formula One, and you kind of get sucked into this Formula One life, and then suddenly someone says to you, do you know what, be a really good idea if you become a team owner. Well, he's not officially a team owner, he's part of a consortium that has bought out a racing team, but he is very much the driving force behind that consortium, and now has his son racing for him as well. Racing Point, Lawrence Stroll and Lance Stroll, and a unique dynamic that I don't think we've ever had in Formula One, whereby a man who is a de facto team owner is now racing his son in Formula One. Their relationship on a personal level is utterly brilliant, and Lawrence Stroll has probably done what every single man, woman, and child would do for their offspring here. If you were a billionaire, you definitely do it for your boy as well. And I make no criticism whatsoever, but there's such an interesting dynamic taking place this season.
There is. There's layers on that, isn't there? Because does this mean that Lance will never drive for another team again? Possibly. It also means that basically one seat is guaranteed to be his, whatever the job he does, whether he does a good job or a bad job, it's guaranteed to be his. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, because I always think in some way, if there's a bit of pressure to perform and deliver, then you step up to the challenge a bit more. Whereas if you know you've got a seat guaranteed, then you can get a little bit comfortable. So I think having a little bit of that pressure is good. What does it mean for the dynamics with Checo? Or today is Checo, tomorrow or day after it could be, or the year after it could be somebody else. Does this mean that when there's only one set of updates, does it mean it's guaranteed to go to Lance? Who knows? There's a lot of tricky dynamics at play, and frankly, these are questions which I don't think they can perhaps answer today, or they want to. They definitely won't want to answer, but I don't think they know the answers.
But I think there are maybe issues that need addressing before the season starts, and very much if we've just got one set of updates, who gets them, and that needs to be set in stone. What normally happens in a racing team, of course, the person with the most points gets the updates and the upgrades first. That needs to be set in stone, and it's a difficult. Omar Safnar as team principal, I think he's very good at giving his drivers freedom, but then coming down hard as and when he needs to be, and has obviously had experience with Checo and Esteban in the past on that one. Lawrence Stroll as a businessman, is a very successful businessman, so won't want to be making decisions that jeopardise his business interest, which is, of course, Racing Point's a Formula One team. And it is, to me, utterly fascinating, and I kind of raise this topic, it's another subplot to this season that I'm looking forward to seeing how it pans out. What I'm really looking forward to seeing is Lance Stroll getting his elbows out and being able to race a little further up the grid than he was last year at Williams.
Well, also, I think, and I don't know what you think about this, but I believe this is also the first time we'll be able to judge Lance as a pure racing driver in some ways, provided the cars are equal. Because, season one he was a complete rookie, and he was up against Massa, who was on his way out and got pulled back in, and, it wasn't a true benchmark, because you had two drivers at complete polar opposite ends of their careers. Last year he was up against another rookie, so again you couldn't really judge them. Whereas now he's up against Checo Perez, who last year, was an equal for Esteban Ocon. They were very evenly matched, and he and he's now pretty well established. He's finished on the podium. He does a good, solid job. So I think we'll finally be able to judge Lance as a pure racing driver as well, which in a way I think is good for Lance, because it's a criticism that's often leveled against him, isn't it? He's there only because of his dad's money, but now he's got an opportunity to prove that.
Yeah, it's a criticism I don't buy. Yes, his dad's money has funded his junior career, but that's a personal sponsorship that's come from his father. Lewis Hamilton's junior career was funded by McLaren. Daniel Ricciardo's junior career was funded by Red Bull. Your junior career was funded by sponsors. Somebody's got to pay for it somehow, and be it personal money from the family or money that's come in from sponsors, it makes no difference. The money's still got to be found. Yep. And I don't think Lawrence has done anything that any other father wouldn't have done. So I don't address that or take that criticism as being relevant in this case.
No, I get that, but you could see why. I can also understand why some people do have that viewpoint. I think it's at the end of the day, it's the nature of the sport that money can buy success. In junior formula, for example, the more money you've got, the more testing you can do, the more R&D you can do, and things like that. It's the same in Formula 1, but to a smaller scale. And unquestionably, when he raced in Formula 3 with Prima, he had those resources which perhaps other teams didn't. So, I think that it's important to give Lance the benefit of judging him on his merits as a racing driver, and I think we'll have that opportunity this year for the first time.
Absolutely. One thing I would say, just finally on Lance Stroll, if he starts as well as he has done through his Williams career, remember his first race in Australia where he picked up 6 or 7 places right at the start before he finally put his brakes on and still kept the car under control. If he does that in Australia this year, chances are he's heading towards the top 3 on the inside at rather a rapid rate. Can't wait to see that either. Now, we're looking at the head-on shot of the Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel here. Do you fancy having a look at the rear end and that exhaust solution and the wastegate pipes above the exhaust? Because it's attracted a lot of attention from pre-season launches before we got to the testing gear. So let's take a closer look, shall we, at the rear end of that Ferrari.
So one of the regulation changes this year was about the way the exhaust outlets were and how they could be directed.
They've changed the angle of elevation a bit to stop kind of blowing hot air over the rear wing.
Exactly, it's blowing the hot air of the rear wing, and the way it's all designed to do with the way the air flows off the rear wing and affects the car behind. The Ferrari powered cars, so this Works car, the Alfa Romeo, as well as the Haas, have all got a slightly interesting solution where they've got the main exhaust pipe, they've got 2 smaller pipes above it, which is the outlet from the wastegate from the turbo, and so they've used that as a bit of a loophole to try and recoup some of the downforce, but it's all marginal gains, but in a very Team Sky cycling Dave Brailsford sort of way. It's all about marginal gains, and that's what Formula 1 is in many ways these days.
Absolutely, but I wonder if any other teams will be able to replicate that if they so wish. I mean, Haas and Alfa aside, obviously. But let's just have a little look once again. There you can see it. It's like a little sighter above the main exhaust.
And if you look at the T-wing also in that Ferrari, you can see just above that exhaust. Look at how much it wobbles around. I was noticing it there. Look at how much it shakes. And that
So how is that having any effect if it's wobbling around like that?
But that's the point of testing.
Yeah, because it's there to deflect air flow somewhere.
Yeah, so they might look at it, and again, it's a weight versus aero balance there. So how do you make it more rigid and how do you make it more solid? It's by adding more material to the mounting of it, right? So you add more, a thicker, stronger material, and it'll shake around less. However, by adding more material at that high up, that height, that's raising the center of gravity. So that's the negative. So you know, designing a Formula One car is all about compromises, and you know, clearly Ferrari believe that they got the right compromise. Maybe they'll change it. You know, maybe they'll look at today and go, well, actually, that's not particularly good for our aero. Let's try a more rigid structure, and let's see. You know, the weight's obviously not good, but let's see if it helps the aeroflow.
A few last tweets from me. Can my friend Colin have a shout out? Says Chris, big Ferrari fan in America, is recovering from a skiing accident last month. Get well soon, Colin. Says Chris. I don't normally do shout outs, but you know, we'll do a shout out for your mate Colin there as well. And one more tweet from you all. The closest we've ever been to the Stroll scenario was with David Brabham in 1990.
Not true, because by that stage the Brabham family did not own the team.
Oh, you see.
So David's a former teammate of mine and a good friend, and actually he spent many years fighting a court case to get the Brabham name back to the family.
Yeah,
and
he's got it now, hasn't he?
Yep,
because they're running Le Mans.
They're planning to. The aim is for 2021, I believe. But poor old David and his family, they've spent an awful lot of time and money and energy getting that name back, and it's a nice part of F1 history, isn't it, that it's back to the family.
Absolutely, I totally agree. It has been an utter pleasure, Karun Chandok, sharing a commentary box with you today.
Yes, it's been a long time, Mr. Croft. It's been 6 years since we last shared a commentary box.
But we've more than made up for it, to be honest, because I've been sat in that chair for the last 3 hours, and with the time now exactly 5 o'clock here in Barcelona, I'm going to say goodbye for the time being. I'll see you with the review show in about an hour's time, when we can all pop down to the paddock and have a little look at the highlights of today. And I will leave you in the company of Karun Chandok and Alex Jacks.
Very interesting. Romain Grosjean's just popped up to second fastest on the day. He's on a set of the yellow sidewall medium compound tyres. That's a pretty good lap. He's doing quite a short run, I think, because he's done a fast lap. Now he's done a slow 1:31.7, so he's done a cool, and he's on our screen at the moment through turn 4. Haas, obviously last year, they created a little bit of a stir, really, because Magnussen did, you know, on fuel tyre corrected, the second fastest time of winter testing, I remember, last year on a set of super softs, and that was particularly impressive. And when we got to Melbourne, everyone was sort of wondering, well, what was going on there? Were they underweight? Were there something tricky? But as the season opened up, it became quite clear that Haas did have a competitive package, and yet again, so far, they're showing a pretty decent term of speed. The car out on track looked pretty balanced as well, although he's got a little bit of slidey coming out of that corner. I think that's to do with the rear tyres going off rather than anything else. Clearly, the rear tyres, again, there's a snap of oversteer as he put the power down coming out of the final corner. DRS open past our commentary box, and he does a 19.356. So, yeah, I mean, you know, in these slightly cooler temperatures, he is getting 2 laps, but clearly the first one is the quicker of the two, and where the tyres are hanging on here is the exit of turn 12, and how that snap of oversteer there. So, Alex, have you what's caught your eye? We're heading into the final hour of testing. What have you been seeing? What do you think of today?
It's hugely exciting. Hello, Karun. Hello, everyone at home. Whether you're getting home from work or you're enjoying half term, maybe getting in from a lecture, there is no better feeling than the first day of Formula One testing. And it is good to be here. It's good to be commentating with you. It's been a while as well. Not as long as you and Crofty.
No, but I think the last time you and I, we were in a bunker somewhere commentating on GP3 race, weren't we?
3 levels down at Biggin Hill, commentating on a mad Russian weekend there. Here in Spain, fantastic pictures. Grosjean, who had a bit of a dramatic morning, the morning session, which started almost immediately with a red flag for Kimi Raikkonen, and then Grosjean had a spin of his own, exactly the same place as he had the spin back in the Grand Prix here 1 year ago. And then from that point of view, we had a mini spin for Sebastian Vettel, and then Grosjean stopped just about his life out there. Considering this is day 1, went down to turn 10, and you got an amazing view at turn 10. Sometimes it doesn't always come across, but you do have a fantastic view into the braking zone, the hairpin there, and then up around basically the entire...
Like Sebastian Vettel, you know, he's had a winter away from the cockpit. Same with Max Verstappen, and they've been training hard and all the rest of it. But nothing beats the G-forces on your neck like a race car and driving around and around. So I'm pretty sure Seb and Max and people like who's the other one who's done 102 laps there, Carlos Sainz, another one in the McLaren. Their necks are going to feel it tomorrow. There's no question about it. And but it's amazing how the muscles just come back alive. It takes a couple of days in a race car, and all of these muscles that you hadn't used over the winter around your neck and your shoulders start to wake up again and come alive. And it's a good feeling. It's like when you had a week away from the gym and you go back and you do a hard day of training and you got that muscle pain. There's a sort of sadistic pleasure in that, and I think that's what these guys are going to be feeling tomorrow. So see Lewis Hamilton on a recovery lap there. The lights flashing away as he recharges the batteries, recoups a bit of energy. We're still out on Twitter, by the way, so do tweet us questions on hashtag SkyF1. Alex and I here for the next hour, and then we've got the wrap-up show with Rachel and Crofty and Craig Slater. We're all going to be down in the paddock with the news of the day as Daniel Ricciardo comes into the pits.
Yeah, stopping on his marks on this his first afternoon as a Renault driver. I think everyone has almost adjusted to the fact he's wearing yellow now rather than the traditional navy and blue of first Toro Rosso and then Red Bull. And the bold move, the peak of the silly season, wasn't it, Karun? What do you think? What's your best guess as to why he has taken what is an undoubted risk and gone to Renault?
I think he looked at the situation at Red Bull and could see Max getting stronger and stronger and stronger as the year went on, and basically felt that if the Red Bull Honda came good, and if Honda came good in particular, then Max would be the one who would be the favourite child, and Max would be the one who would be the championship favourite. So instead of being the number 2 to Max at Red Bull, he decided to go be a number 1 potentially at Renault. Now,
well, potentially, as you say.
Yeah, but I think it is a huge risk because it's one of those questions. Every human being is different. Every driver is different. Personally, if I was ever in that situation, I wasn't. But you'd always choose being the number 1 at a top team. Being a number 2 at a top team, I think, because you look at someone like David Coulthard, for example. He had those years at McLaren where Mika became sort of default number 1 in the eyes of Ron Dennis, 98, 99, winning those world championships. But DC was there, winning Grand Prix. He got to win various Grand Prix, and then there was a year where Mika, 2001, wasn't having a good year. He didn't get on with the car, lost the motivation a little bit, and all of a sudden DC became the championship favourite. Look at Eddie Irvine at Ferrari.
Yeah, 1999.
He powered on as the number 2 and then got his opportunity. And you're not going to get that if you're not in a top team. So it's a huge risk for any driver to walk away from a top seat. Rubens Barrichello is one for who it worked out. He walked away from Ferrari, went to Honda, had a 3-year stint where the car wasn't very good, but then lucked into the Brawn in 2009
yes.
and was able to be a championship contender and win some races. So
you wouldn't have taken that decision? You wouldn't have what is essentially deliberately chosen to not be in a race-winning team in terms of the caliber?
No.
And of course the squad, Renault based at Enstone, they have a history of winning races. They have a history of winning championships, but not for a while now. Got to go back to 2006 with Fernando Alonso.
Exactly, but I think I would have gambled on staying at Red Bull and hoped that the Red Bull Honda was competitive this year. In 2 years' time, he could have gone to Renault anyway. Renault would have had him in 2 years' time.
Yeah.
And by then, he could have won some races at Red Bull Honda. He could have maybe won a championship at Red Bull Honda if the Honda turns out to be amazing. So, I think in some ways he's gone a little bit early, because also Renault aren't yet ready to be a top team. They might be in 2020 or 2021, but I don't think they're going to be in 2019.
It would be a huge shock, wouldn't it? If you look at the progress that they have made, they were perhaps a little bit fortunate with the disqualifications for the Haas cars on a couple of occasions. Romain Grosjean had a very scruffy start to last year.
But they didn't get a podium, did they?
No, but ultimately, if you see what the team is saying, they're not saying positions, they're saying progress.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I think he could have potentially waited a couple of years. But then, in 2 years' time, would his stock value have gone down? You know, when he signed for Renault, his stock value was still very high. But then Max went on and run 9 races in a row of out-qualifying and outscoring Daniel. So, you know, then as the year went on, Daniel's stock value started to go downhill. So maybe he signed when his stock value was at its highest and he got the most amount of money for it.
It's interesting because I think he was a little bit surprised that his stock wasn't as high as he expected it to be. I think he expected to have various serious chats with Ferrari. Obviously, we've got Charles Leclerc there, and then very serious chats. Certainly, I think Mercedes is somewhat confusing to him. Mercedes have a great team harmony. Obviously, Bottas without the win last year, and then Ferrari have gone down an almost un-Ferrari route by putting a driver from their academy in the car at last. He's found the door shut, and so gone to Renault. But that is going to be a really interesting thing because Hülkenberg, no pushover.
No, and Crofty and I talked about before. I think it's a big year for Nico Hülkenberg. So, yeah, let's see. I mean, I was just looking at some questions here. So, Orbit GFX asks opinions on Robert Kubica returning to F1 because as a Polish person, I am stoked. So actually, I haven't really talked about it. I don't know if you and Will and Crofty discussed it earlier, but we didn't really talk about Robert Kubica yet.
We spoke about it a little bit. We spoke about the sheer determination.
Well, it's a great
will
human
to
story.
get back on this grid.
Yeah, it's a great human story. I mean, I've known Robert since 2005. We raced together in World Series by Renault, and he's a friend as much as anything else. And to see him go through what he went through in 2011 with that accident, it's no exaggeration to say this is a guy who literally has come back from being on really death's bed to coming back to driving and racing at the pinnacle of motorsport is an extraordinary human story. But he wants to be judged as one of 20 racing drivers. He doesn't want to be. What's going on here? As Daniel Kvyat and Lewis Hamilton messing around with
nearly a silly accident. Oh, it feels like practice already.
Yeah, they're sort of trying to get out of each other's way, but not really doing it particularly well. But Lewis is now backed out. But Kubica, I mean, it's an amazing human story, but he wants to be judged not as someone who's got, lingering injuries to his right arm and therefore some certain limitations in his mobility with that arm. He wants to be judged as a racing driver like every other one of those 19 guys on the grid. So, and when we get to Melbourne, and we get to qualifying in Melbourne, he will be. And he's not got an easy job. I think George Russell is a properly good talent, and he's going to be a hard challenge for Robert to take on. Hopefully when the Williams does show up here in Barcelona, we'll be able to see that it's a reasonably competitive package and more competitive than last year. Hamilton running a little bit wide out of turn 2, got a little bit scruffy there as he's going to have to abort this lap and have another go.
It's quite an interesting lineup at Williams because you have the Formula 2 champion in George Russell coming off the back, and maybe he's got a little bit lost, of a equally dominant season as Charles Leclerc. 7 wins for George Russell, 7 wins for Charles Leclerc. Stoffel Van Dorn did a similar thing. Completely different paths for Van Dorn and Leclerc in Formula 1, as you will all know at home, but that does show you the level of talent at junior level that George Russell is bringing in, and
Norris and Albon.
Oh, absolutely. The top three
are all here.
Only happened once before, and they have all graduated this year. Big day for all of them tomorrow, or at least it would have been. Of course, Williams not running for a second day. You've been close to the team. You've worked with them. I know you do a lot of stuff with them on the historic side. How much will they be hurting about the fact that they're going to be 2 days late to this test?
It hurts, unquestionably. If I popped down to see Claire and some of the team earlier, and it's absolutely gutting for them to be sitting here listening to these cars going around.
Yeah.
Because they're sitting here listening to these cars going around, and every minute that they can hear cars going, they're thinking, oh, we're losing valuable track time.
Yeah.
And and deep down, it will hurt in the pit of their stomach that this is not a day that they're participating in. So, you know, it will hurt because mileage is so restricted nowadays in Formula One. You got these 8 days of pre-season testing. You got a couple of days in Hungary mid-season. You got a couple of the Pirelli tests, and then a couple of days post-season. So really, it's not a lot of testing. If you compare, you know, I was looking through some notes from 2002 or 2003, I think, when I was at the Williams Heritage Workshop the other day, and there was one particular day they had 4 cars testing in 3 different circuits on the same day. There was, you know, there was a car doing start practice. There was a car doing Monaco high downforce testing. There were 2 cars doing a tire test, all on the same day. You think of all the miles that Ferrari used to do at Fiorano. You speak to Luciano Berti and Luca Badoa, the test drivers. You know, they'd be testing from the moment the sun rose until it got dark at Fiorano. You know, Michael Schumacher and Eddie Irvine used to do free practice in Monaco on Thursday, go to Fiorano on Friday, test all day long at Fiorano.
When everyone else is having the rest day on the Friday in Monaco.
Come back on Friday night and then qualify on Saturday. So
that's not the traditional Monaco partying image that you might have of that weekend.
Yeah.
But cost-wise, it was astronomical.
Exactly.
Which is why they've imposed these restrictions.
So all that to say, for Williams now to miss 25% of pre-season testing,
it's enormous when you put it like that.
Is a big, big blow. Here's Valtteri Bottas and Toto Wolff. Valtteri Bottas.
The Bottas beard.
He's pointing his beard, isn't he?
What do you reckon to that? That is that part of a new year, new me? Forget about 2018. Hits the ground running. Everyone stops talking about this lack of win.
Well, he was he was really unlucky to not win last year.
Huge.
He should have won in Baku. I think he should have won in China. Definitely should have won in Sochi when he would go for Lewis. Arguably, I think he should have won in Bahrain if Mercedes understood that Vettel was on a one-stop strategy sooner, and then he could have pushed a bit harder earlier on. So I think there were definitely 3, arguably 4 wins that Valtteri could have had. And actually, that early part of the season, if you think about it, if he'd won Bahrain, if he'd won Baku, and he'd won in China, 3 out of the first 4 races, he would have been ahead of Lewis in the World Championship. He would have had momentum on his side, and his whole season would have looked different, I think. So
everyone writing, is it Rosberg again, articles, completely different narrative around his entire year.
Again, we've got Kvyat.
They're getting stuck into each other, aren't they?
I don't know who's messing whose run up here. It does look like Kvyat.
Yeah, Hamilton not happy there.
No, and he's not. He needs to get far away from the Toro Rosso, I think. But they're trying to get lap after lap, repeated runs. But this is interesting as well, though, isn't it, Alex? Because we're getting to see how close the cars can follow each other.
Absolutely.
So he's backed out of it, but
he doesn't fancy it anymore.
Yeah. But that's a bit telling, isn't it? That a Mercedes, with these new front wing rules, wasn't able to overtake a Toro Rosso easily.
Yeah, and the initial out of the box pace. I know you can't judge too much in terms of lap times on day number 1, but you would be expecting, of course, that W10 Mercedes to be easily getting past. Maybe not in that part of the racetrack, but he's behind him for a couple of laps. The changes that you can clearly see, the wider front wing, the slightly higher rear wing, and the chasm that is now DRS when that rear wing opens. It's slightly wider as well at the back of the car, designed to improve overtaking. Do you think it will?
Proof will be in the pudding, won't it?
It certainly will.
Talk to me after the first 4 races. Again, we can't judge it really till we get to there. So let us see. I'm trying to see if there's a few more questions. So on the subject of Bottas, Alex, let's go back to that. Ewan Warren asks, if Bottas isn't able to improve in 2019 and loses his Mercedes seat to Ocon, where do you see his future going? Would another team want him, or would he leave F1 altogether? make no mistake, Valtteri Bottas is a very, very good and fast racing driver. This is a guy who, on his day, has been capable of qualifying and beating Lewis Hamilton, who is arguably the best qualifier in the history of F1 since Ayrton Senna. So this is a very fast racing driver. And much like I think Ferrari did the right thing by replacing Kimi with Leclerc, and I'm also very glad Kimi's found a seat at Alfa Romeo. If Valtteri, this is a big year for Valtteri. I think if you ask me who are the two drivers under the most pressure coming into the season, I would say it's Valtteri and Sebastian Vettel for two different reasons.
Okay.
I think Valtteri Bottas is under pressure because you got Esteban Ocon lurking, you got George Russell lurking, both with Mercedes contracts, both snapping at Toto Wolff's heels, saying, "Sign me up, sign me up, sign me up." And if Valtteri doesn't deliver this year, Toto will sign one of them up. So it's a big year for him. For Sebastian, Ferrari have drafted in Charles Leclerc to take Kimi's seat. So Sebastian's gone from his nice little comfort zone of being a number one, where Kimi a couple of tenths behind, to having this young pup who's young, motivated, and very, very fast. And also a big part of the Ferrari system already. He's been a big part of the family for many years now. He knows them well. They know him well. And, so I think those are the two drivers under the most amount of pressure. So, yeah, I think to answer the question that came on social media from Ewan, I think if Valtteri doesn't step up, he will be replaced at the end of this year.
But I think he knows that going in.
Yeah, he knows that going in. And if he does get replaced, he will find a seat elsewhere in F1 because he's a quality driver.
Yeah, I think he is going up against Lewis Hamilton in the form of his life, which I don't think anyone on the grid would do particularly well with. And as you say, was driving well at the start of the year. Maybe the question with Valtteri is, when the head goes down, does it stay down? Does he have a problem motivating himself? Because we saw in the first season, got himself into a little bit of a lull after the summer break. Similar thing happened when the win didn't come this year. He cannot afford that in 2019. Otherwise, it's back to the midfield.
Yeah. No. So let's see. Daniel asks, Alex, which underdog F1 team, P4 to P10, do you think would be the likeliest in the future to win a constructors' title?
Well, that might need a little bit of a rule tweak.
Yeah, but let's say, if you had to pick one, so you'd have to say Renault have got the resources in terms of money and being a manufacturer team to do it. You'd like to think that one day, and if you take your romantic F1 historical sort of perspective, it'd be lovely to see McLaren and Williams competitive again, wouldn't it? That's, they're part of F1's history in the same way as Ferrari are. They're part of F1's DNA.
Absolutely.
I think everyone would love to see both McLaren and Williams competitive.
Looking at the Williams garage right now, as they are still preparing, still working on getting the car ready for what we now expect to be Wednesday. I think the McLaren car, in terms of its design, has impressed a few people today. To answer the question, it's most likely McLaren have phenomenal facilities, and it's worth underlining the same applies for the car that you're looking at the moment, the Alpha. That has the old BMW wind tunnel. It's got a lot of staff from Audi's old World Endurance Championship, and there is huge talent, but the step at the moment, last year there was a big three for a reason. Only driver on the podium last year who wasn't from the big three was Sergio Perez, who had his best 4 laps of the season, when it absolutely counted in classic Sergio Perez style. Sniff of a podium, he got the podium. That's fine on one occasion to get one podium in a crazy race in Baku. Doing it week in, week out, you can't really cheat that. You can't really drive around the problem, and the sheer performance of Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull's a long way clear. At least it was last year. I think Renault, you'd have to say.
I feel bad for these Williams mechanics, aren't they? They're sort of, doing all these jobs and just trying to kill the time. Look at these two again, Alex. Lewis Daniel Kvyat.
We saw a replay, and these two. I mean, I'm not entirely sure whether they're doing it deliberately or whether they are going to be getting incredibly irritated with each other. But
well, I think Mercedes need to call Lewis in for a drive-through, because then he can make a nice big gap. Actually, I've just looked out of the commentary box window to his pit board. I think they've called him in, so he's backed out of this lap.
Yeah,
so
last time around he was doing a 1:24.5, Kvyat a 1:25.8.
Well, that's why he's catching him. He keeps backing off.
Yeah, catching him immediately.
Catches him immediately. So it's a bit frustrating for Lewis, really. But yeah, reigning world champion, 72 laps on the board for the afternoon. So that's a good haul of laps, isn't it?
Yeah, 66 the race distance here normally, as we get another look at these two tripping over each other.
Yeah, he's all over the back of that Toro Rosso. But interesting, look, even in the last corner, he struggles to follow closely behind him. Has a good slipstream down the straight. Doesn't actually use DRS, which, by the way, in this year's regulations, the DRS slot is now been increased.
Yes.
So actually, the DRS is going to be more powerful and more effective, which I don't know if I'm a big fan of, to be honest. I was never a fan of DRS from the day it got introduced, because I felt, as a purist, I felt it was slightly artificial. Like, I understand why they've done it, but I've never been a huge fan of DRS, and making the slot bigger just makes it slightly more artificial. I think back to when we had all those great overtaking moves. It wasn't about quantity, it's about quality. However, I do accept that with how aerodynamically sophisticated these cars are, and how complex they are, it's not as easy to follow as it was in the 90s, for example, when we saw Nigel Mansell go around the outside of Gerhard Berger at Peraltada. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sure there's a video somewhere online on the Formula 1 website about great overtakes, and
absolutely
Mansell going around the outside of Gerhard's.
So we're going to get an overtake here. We're getting a replay of Lewis Hamilton finally pulling alongside and getting past the Toro Rosso down to turn 1, and no contest from either of them, and that problem disappears then for the world champion. More questions. Get your questions into #SkyF1. Phil asks, my friend Colin wants to know why Williams can't run the 2018 cars just for the drivers to get back in the swing of things.
Frankly, it's about money, it's about resource. You know, to run one of these cars per day costs probably £150,000, and it involves people, and it involves a whole lot of logistics issues. Now, if Williams are up against it, getting this year's car up and running, then they might as well put every spare body they've got into getting this year's car built in time, and not divert any resources to using last year's car. Plus, last year's car is quite different. The wings are different, the barge boards are different, the aero level is different. So, yes, you can use the car to get the drivers up to speed, but frankly, they've got two drivers who've driven last year's car a reasonable amount now, and they don't really need that. They both know Barcelona intimately well. They don't need more laps of the circuit to learn it, so they're much better off really having that effort and money and time spent to trying to get this year's car out the door.
So Williams, a former great team, all those champions, of course, Jacques Villeneuve, Damon Hill, Nigel Mansell in the past. They're struggling. Another team that struggled last year was McLaren, currently the second fastest time on a 1:19.3. Carlos Sainz has had a bit of an issue stopping at the end of the pit lane. Pretty much the only real incident that we've seen this afternoon. And another question in from Harry asks, who will score more points this season, Carlos Sainz or Lando Norris? And no reflection of Lando Norris's ability at all. He is a huge talent, as he proved last year, and he's proved all the way through his racing career. Last year in Formula 2, the runner-up. First time he has not won a championship that he's entered. I think there's another one as well, but it was only a minor series. So he's used to winning titles. Had that run ended by George Russell. Gets the promotion up to Formula 1, and difficult teammate to be paired with in terms of raw speed, because although Carlos Sainz has had quite a strange couple of years, could easily have been in the Red Bull alongside Verstappen, made a big deal of wanting to get out of Toro Rosso, went to Renault, and now finds himself in McLaren. So bit of an odd situation for him to be shuffling about the grid so much.
Yeah, but to answer the question that came in, I think Carlos will outscore Lando if I had to pick one of them, just purely based on experience. I'll be interested to see how Lando goes this year. As you say, he did a very good job in his rookie season of Formula 2. He's Formula 3 champion before that, and he's been a very well prepared rookie in terms of having a lot of FP1 sessions, a lot of testing, a lot of simulator time. He's integrated himself well into the whole McLaren world down at Woking, so he's very much part of the furniture there, and I'll be interested to see how he gets on in comparison with Carlos, who, Carlos hasn't had a podium yet, so he's not an established top line driver, but he is an established good Formula 1 driver who's had some very good results at Toro Rosso in particular, but also in Renault. He had some good point scoring races last year.
So into the final half hour of this opening day of testing for Formula 1 in 2019. A driver who almost certainly finished at the top of the timing pages, Sebastian Vettel. You mentioned him earlier, Karun, in terms of being under enormous pressure. Was the team trying to give him a little bit of confidence, saying that he would be the favoured driver at their launch earlier a couple of days ago?
Possibly. I must admit, I didn't hear the exact words that were said. I read a few of the headlines across the internet and social media, but I didn't actually hear the exact words. So I think ultimately, and I know this from experience, teams gravitate towards a guy or girl who's quicker. It's ultimately the stopwatch never lies. And when we get to Melbourne, or when we get to the first few races, if Seb is out qualifying Leclerc on a regular basis, then the team will gravitate towards him. However, if we get there and Leclerc is holding his own and starts to qualify Seb, they're going to have equal status. I can't see how or why Ferrari would favour one driver over the other unless there's a clear performance delta between them.
The quote was from new team principal Mattia Binotto, if there are particular situations, our priority will be Sebastian.
Okay. So,
but you don't.
So that's still a bit vague, though, isn't it? Because that doesn't
it is a little bit, isn't it?
That doesn't actually say what the particular scenario situations are. So, yeah, I think ultimately it will come down to the stopwatch, and I'll be very surprised if they don't give Leclerc an equal opportunity, at least at the start of the season. I think Ferrari need to learn from their lessons last year, which is, I think there was a management failure in some ways where they didn't back Sebastian early enough. Hockenheim last year, it was crazy when they when they had a situation where Seb came up behind Kimi, and they took forever to get Kimi out of the way. Seb lost about 6 or 7 seconds, and it was at a time when Lewis was catching him. The drizzle started to come down, Hamilton was gaining, and really, they shouldn't have put Seb under the extra pressure.
Yeah. And
finally, it took for Kimi to come on the radio and say, just tell me what you want me to do. And they went, just get out of the way. All right, then. And he did. So, they shouldn't ever have those situations middle of the race. It should be, right, middle of the season, who's leading the championship, who's the horse that we're going to back.
Yep.
Right, you, Seb, you're miles ahead. Charles, sorry, you're the number 2 for the rest of this year. Too bad.
Yeah.
Next year, you have your next chance. And I think they need to do that more. What they did or didn't do, in fact, in Hockenheim, hurt them. And then they compounded it by a bizarre situation in Monza where, they chose to give Kimi the slipstream in qualifying, and then instead of asking him to support Seb on race day morning, they sacked him on race day morning.
It wasn't exactly motivation for Kimi Räikkönen to play the team game.
And Toto got a lot of flack after Sochi for imposing team orders there and, making Valtteri get out the way and give Lewis the victory. And I think he 100% did the right thing by imposing the team order. What I think he did wrong in that instance was not having the conversation before the race. So then you had Valtteri on the radio going, "Oh, we're going to switch back. What's going on?" And it all got a little bit messy there.
It was messy, wasn't it?
Whereas the easiest thing to do would have been call Lewis in for an undercut. He undercuts Valtteri. He gets ahead on the strategy, and everyone would go, "Well, actually, they gave the favoured strategy to the guy leading the World Championship." So, yeah,
shrug of the shoulders on your move.
Yeah, fair enough. So, I think that was the only criticism I have of what they did there in Sochi. I mean, it's very easy for people to say, oh, it's wrong and they shouldn't be, it's against the spirit of racing and we all want to see racing. But, yes, I'm a racer driver, I'm a racer, I'm a purist at heart. However, I am not the head of an organization with 1,200 jobs on the line who've all got bonuses potentially coming. I'm not the head of an organization who is responsible to answer to the board of Mercedes and all his sponsors who are pouring millions of euros into that team. And Toto is, and that's why he's paid the big bucks to make those big decisions. So I don't disagree with what he did.
Yeah.
And I think Ferrari...
Well, it was very odd to see Ferrari with their history of team orders not imposing them in that situation. And it was one of many occasions last year where a lot of people in this paddock pointed to Sebastian having to go beyond his role of simply driving the car and having to think about the strategy. You can go back a long time to see Sebastian Vettel's frustration and open questioning of his track positioning, the strategy that he's on. It has been a running sore for the four-time world champion.
Yeah,
and I think...
but sometimes to his own detriment. And I think if you look back to when he was at Red Bull winning all of those world championships, he had Guillaume Roquelin and he had Helmut and he had Christian, and they managed him. Seb isn't completely free from having a bit of the red mist come down. You look at that moment of road rage in Baku.
Yep.
And occasionally he does have a moment of frustration, and he does have the red mist come down and lose his shirt a little bit. And I think in the Red Bull days, Rocky would often come on the radio and say, "Sebastian, listen to me. It's under control. Don't worry. Don't panic." And Rocky really managed him and massaged him and led him to those world championships. And Mark Webber made that point to me last year. I remember talking to him about it in Austin, and because Mark was obviously in those meetings, he was in the debrief. He was the guy that Sebastian was fighting against. Yeah. And he'd say you'd often sit in these meetings and you'd hear Rocky, just like the big brother role in a way I was talking about earlier between GP and Max. Rocky would almost put an arm around Sebastian's shoulder and say, "Look, mate, just chill out. It's under control. Don't worry. We're doing it. We're dealing with it." And I think he's missing a little bit of that at Ferrari. He does need a little bit of that managing, I think.
Yeah, there's a story in when Mark Webber won the Monaco Grand Prix. He talks about it in his book when he said that he was hugely frustrated to have got to the peak of his career so far in 2010, won the Monaco Grand Prix, and then Vettel was told he had a cracked chassis. And he was like, he didn't have a cracked chassis. And that was part of Red Bull management, Helmut Marko, at the time, saying, trying to get a performance out of their driver. And I wonder if there was a sort of conversation before the start of the year where Vettel was open about what he needs and Ferrari were receptive, because it seemed an odd thing to say. Just struck as an odd thing to say in terms of will favour him at the start of the season when we haven't even seen a single time lap.
You're talking about Binotto's comment?
Yes.
Right. Sorry, I was confused there when you were talking about the Webber Monaco story. Sorry.
Yeah.
I try not to read into these things until and unless you know the full context. You have to bear in mind this depends on what question he was asked and all those sort of things. So I try not to read into those sort of headlines too much. I think ultimately, and this is something actually Luciano Berti was talking about in a podcast I listened to recently, because Luciano was around at Ferrari in the mid-2000s during that Schumacher era of great success. And he talked about how, Maurizio Arrivabene wasn't a particularly sympathetic leader. He wasn't a particularly, not a leader who really listened to his people. He was quite a strong dictatorial person who was in charge. He was sort of a my way or highway person.
Yeah.
Whereas, Binotto has spent a quarter of a century at Ferrari. He's there through and through. But he's a people person much more, I think. From speaking to some friends of mine who worked with him in the past and are still there now, they have an awful lot of respect for him as a person and as a technical leader. So if he can carry on that sort of sympathetic way into his role as a as a team principal, then perhaps Ferrari will benefit from it. And maybe, he'll sit there and look at the human side and say, look, as a human being, forget racing driver, but as a human being, what does Sebastian Vettel as a human being need to extract the maximum performance that his talent is clearly capable of delivering? Because I don't believe we saw the best of Sebastian Vettel in the second half of last year. We certainly didn't. And I think, hopefully Mattia will make the structure around Sebastian work to extract the best Sebastian Vettel that there is in there.
Will be interesting to see. Just a confirmation of the running order if you are just switching on at the end of the day. 20 minutes to go this opening day of the 2019 season, with Vettel ahead of Grosjean. Vettel has done 161 laps, Grosjean has done 58, Sainz has done 108, he is third. Verstappen, we saw running the clear visor down to turn 1 a few moments ago as the sun sets here in Barcelona. Fifth we have Raikkonen on his first day for Alfa Romeo. He's done 104 laps. Daniel Kvyat sixth with 73, and then we have Perez with 30, Bottas with 69. He swapped cars with Lewis Hamilton, who has done 76, and then 65 laps, I should say, for 10th place Hülkenberg, and his teammate Ricciardo, taking over that car in the afternoon, has done 44 laps as they work through accumulating that data, getting a read. A lot of the teams had shakedowns, of course. It was pretty tight for Renault, currently at the bottom, to get to avoid what's happened to Williams today and not be able to run, but they did manage to have a shakedown, and they have managed to clear 100 laps between their drivers today. Enormous distance. Last year, Sebastian Vettel, the driver you're looking at right now in that matte livery Ferrari, did 643 laps, and he's up to right now, crossing the start-finish line, 162 logged today, and maybe a signal of intent. He is, after the brutal criticism and the few painful moments he had at the back end of last year, four-time world champion starting this year with the most laps of anyone so far. You can still get your questions in.
Sorry, Alex.
Go on.
Just look at the timing screen. And on our screen, by the way, we've got a Ferrari and a Red Bull running close together. But Carlos Sainz is on a very good lap. He's come across the line in an 18.5, so that's a strong lap to go second fastest for Carlos Sainz. 110 days on his first proper day as an official McLaren driver. He obviously did Abu Dhabi, but that's a strong lap there. But look at these two running close together. This is really good information for Max Verstappen. He's able, and Red Bull are able to understand how closely he's able to follow.
Thinking about the late move.
And he has a lot.
Nearly went into race commentary there. Was going to give it one of Crofty's down the insides.
Yeah.
He did go down the inside at the end, and he made his way through.
Sebastian's backed out of it, I think.
Yeah, good read for Max Verstappen, as you say, for the grip levels of this set of regulations for 2019, as he follows a car for the first time in that sort of trim.
Yeah. Max on the yellow sidewall, medium tyre. Sebastian's actually running the prototype tyre, which is a variation on the medium soft, I believe. So he's running on there. Here's Carlos Sainz. So he's done that time on a set of the soft tyres. So that somewhat explains his gain in performance and his jump up the leaderboard. Lots of flow viz there. You can see on the rear diffuser on the left-hand side, bottom of the floor. So McLaren using every lap possible to gather information and gather data. This is a slow lap for him to cool the tyres, and now he's going to wind himself up to have another go. Coming down the start-finish straight, we can follow him round this lap. DRS wide open into turn 1. It's a big year for McLaren, isn't it? As he comes through turn 3, the car porpoising, just slightly bouncing a little bit on those bumps through turn 2 and chucks it now into turn 4. Very good first sector. That's the fastest first sector time we've seen of anybody today, and that includes Sebastian Vettel's Ferrari. So the tyre are starting to work. Well, no, sorry, well, they are working because he's done a good lap before this. But I think you have to also bear in mind the track's got a lot of rubber down now compared to when Vettel did his time this morning. So you can see those chunks of rubber away from the racing line. And Sainz, bit of a lock up into turn 10. He locked the outside front a little bit, I think, as he went into turn 10. And again, the rear of the car stepping slightly out of line. And this is symptomatic of the rear tyres starting to overheat, I think, towards the final part of the lap. And I'd be interested to see. The middle sector is quite some way down from what he did on the previous lap. Out of the final corner, past our commentary box and across the line. Yeah, he doesn't improve in the second or third sectors, and I do think it looks like the tyres have had enough. Basically, he was able to hammer sector 1, and then as the lap went on, he lost 5 tenths in sector 2 and 8 tenths in sector 3. So that could be it on this set of tyres.
After all McLaren have been through in the last few years, given their lofty heights in the past, they will be very cheered indeed to see a car up there in second place. And although times are not the most important thing of this first test, maybe wait until the second one for a proper read of the competitive picture. But that will give everyone a boost back at Woking.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Do you? But do you? In terms of, is it just human nature? Is it not even a conscious thing? If they hadn't done any running today, you would much rather be in McLaren's situation than Williams.
No, obviously, but I don't think that McLaren are going to have a particular boost by being second today, as opposed to Mercedes being 8th or 9th today. I just think that it's too early. It's too early for us to be saying, wow, this Ferrari is mind-blowing because they're at the top of the times by 4 tenths. I think today isn't about that. Today is about, for these guys at Red Bull Racing, about building relationships. It's about building that relationship with Honda. It's about understanding the beast they've got. It's about understanding the systems. It's for Max Verstappen to get comfortable with how does the car work on engine overrun? How do the different engine modes work? How does it work with lift and coast and fuel consumption? What about cooling? What about, have we had any leaks? Does all the systems work in the way they're supposed to? Today is about mileage and laps. I mean, Max and Red Bull will be I think they'll be very satisfied, frankly, with 120 laps on the board. Their first day with Honda, that's a seriously good amount of laps. Contrast that with what Honda McLaren did, a few years ago.
Yeah.
It's a big difference. So, I think Christian Horner and Helmut Marko and Max and Pierre Gasly, they'll all be pretty chuffed, really, with that first day. And conversely, I don't think anyone at Woking is going to be getting excited about being P2 on the times today.
I think they might enjoy it a little bit. But we'll agree to disagree.
Well,
I know it doesn't mean anything. I get entirely the point you're making. You're 100% correct.
We could potentially ask Zach Brown, because I think he's here today, so we can ask him. I mean, he's going to be...
Drag him on the review show that is coming up at the top of the hour.
He's obviously going to be happier having done 113 laps.
Yeah, that's the main deal. The laps is absolutely crucial. Vettel has done 166 laps. Sainz has gone over 100 as well, 113. Same applies to Verstappen. I think that is the biggest point that you mentioned there, Karun, with it could be one of the defining things of the season, that Honda and Red Bull relationship, given how good the Red Bull chassis has been year after year. And to get over 100 laps, as you say, sharp contrast to the horror story that began for McLaren and Honda, even when they did their first shakedown with that engine at the back end of 2014.
To me, that is the biggest question mark, and that's the one that I'm most intrigued about heading into this season. Will Honda deliver a power unit that allows Red Bull to be championship contenders again? That is the single biggest question going into this season, because we know Ferrari are capable of producing a car that can win world championships. They did for the last 2 years, arguably, and had probably the fastest car last year. We know Mercedes obviously can. If Red Bull and Honda can, then we've all of a sudden got 6 drivers and 3 teams fighting for this world championship, and that will be fantastic for everyone following Formula One.
Absolutely, and given the form of Verstappen at the back end of last year, after that difficult start to the campaign, when he seemingly was driving into everything, and then he was putting in some absolutely career best performances, what should have been the win in Brazil would surely have been his most impressive performance. That was amazing stuff from him at the back end of last season.
It was. I mean, Mexico, I still argue, is probably the most dominant victory of the season, apart from Lewis and Ricard. But you know, Mexico, if you think about it, he got qualified by Daniel because he had some engine issues on the off throttle. He got qualified by Daniel. He took the lead into turn 1, and I know Daniel retired with an engine issue. I think it was an engine issue at least, anyway. But Max had pulled 25 seconds on Daniel by that stage.
Yeah, it was
equal cars. He had pulled a pit stop on his teammate. That was utter dominance. You know, forget everybody else, but he pulled an incredible gap. And I think that was the day that told me Max is ready to be a world championship contender. That and Singapore. I thought Singapore was a very mature drive.
What was that? Well, Singapore doesn't stand out. What did
he qualified at the front row.
Yep.
He got to turn 7 on the opening lap, and Sebastian went around the outside of him. And I think Max version 1 would have collided and damaged his front wing with Sebastian.
Fair point.
Max version 2 backed out of the fight, allowed Sebastian to get in front of him there, and then bided his time. And when it came to the round of pit stops, Ferrari blinked first, they pitted first. Max hammered in some mega laps on used tyres to do an overcut, and then outfoxed Sebastian on the outlap. And I thought those were the 2 races, Singapore and Mexico, that more than Brazil in some ways, but those are the 2 races that really underlined to me that Verstappen's ready to be a world championship contender.
And hopefully he will have the equipment to do it, because how good is this season going to be if we have Hamilton in the form of his life up against a resurgent Sebastian Vettel and the young pretender, don't discount Leclerc as well, and a hungry Valtteri Bottas to prove people wrong. It is shaping up to be a phenomenal season, certainly after those 124 laps with the Honda power unit. Of course, this is the first year for a long time that Honda are going to power 2 teams. Got to go all the way back to when Super Aguri were racing in Formula 1 for the last time that has happened, and that was sometimes something talked about, maybe McLaren tying up with the Manor team to get double the data and maybe use Manor as the way that Toro Rosso were used last year in terms of mileage and taking penalties, which allowed the brains back in Japan to bring more updates. Renault having a little bit of a dig at that, saying that they weren't able to make the same progress because they weren't able to take all the grid penalties that Toro Rosso were. But it's a bit of a risk for Red Bull to take away an engine that was taking them to race wins, but they don't just want race wins, they want championships, and they have decided, just like McLaren did, that the best way to get those championships is to put Honda power in the back.
Yeah, it's different scenarios in some ways. You know, McLaren at the time were partnered with Mercedes. They chose to go away from being a customer Mercedes team to a works Honda team. That didn't work out for them at the time. Red Bull have gone from being a customer Renault team to a works Honda team. However, Honda have now had a few years back in the sport. They've now had, they've had 4 seasons of being back in F1, and they've got Red Bull are hoping that all the pain that McLaren went through is going to pay dividends for them, which is, I think Red Bull have done the right thing. I think if I was Helmut Marko and Christian Horner, I'd make the same call. I think it's the right decision to do something different. There's no point just sticking with what they had and just finishing third all the time. They don't exist to finish third. They exist to win.
So Vettel, Sainz, Grosjean, Verstappen, Raikkonen the top 5, but the laps, 4 drivers over 100, pretty key as well as we come into the final few moments of the day.
Yeah, I can see Toto Wolff and Esteban Ocon actually have just wandered to the pit wall to watch the last 5 minutes of testing. So Esteban Ocon, of course, this today will hurt him. You know, being here at the track, watching other cars, it's the worst feeling in the world. I remember when I became a reserve driver at Lotus in 2011 and going to a test and watching cars going around for the first time was agonizing. And you know, being a racing driver, hanging around a racetrack, watching other people driving is an awful feeling. So I sympathize with him. And you know, at the start of the year, he'll feel all bright-eyed, bush-tailed, and you know, go to all the meetings, go to all the briefings, and be up for it. By the time we get halfway through the season, it's a really frustrating existence in some ways, because you know, you can't contribute things, you know, because whatever you're saying, and you might have good ideas and good suggestions and things you want to say, but the team will always listen to the race drivers first.
Yep.
So the benefit for him is obviously the contribution he can make in the simulator. You know, he can do a lot of development in the simulator, and Mercedes do put a lot of emphasis on what they do in the sims. So he can do things that are beneficial, but it will be very tough for him not being here driving the car. So listen, Alex, I've got to leave you to go join Rachel and Crofty down in the paddock. So I'm going to leave you
for the review show, which is coming up in just under 5 minutes' time. Yep. We'll let you go. Karun, always a pleasure.
Good to see you.
And we will finish the final few moments of the day. Just saw Vettel head out in the Ferrari for a final run of a day where he is going to top the times. Also heading out, Carlos Sainz. We can see Grosjean in your picture at the moment. Verstappen is out there, and Raikkonen as well. Yeah, just a few minutes until the review show coming up for you on Sky. And it will be a very eventful day for Rachel, Crofty and Karun to look back at, and quite a lot to unpick. It was a day that began with a spin for Kimi Raikkonen and a lot of talk about the Alfa Romeo. It was launched at what seems like an age ago, mainly because it was an age ago, at before 9 o'clock this morning. Huge gaggle of photographers at the end of the pit lane as Toto Wolff and Esteban Ocon in animated conversation going back into the Mercedes garage as Sebastian Vettel winds it up once again, and he crosses the line to begin his 169th lap of the day. A reminder, 66 laps, the normal race distance around this circuit that they know, well, better than the back of their hands. That matte livery on the Ferrari, which looks more orange than scarlet, and he makes his way through the turns. And Vettel moving himself nicely through the corners. He'll be very, very satisfied with his day's work and his lap time. Not about the lap times, no disputing that, because you don't know the fuel loads that the teams are running, and he's not on one of the designated C1 to C5 tyres. We do have soft, medium and hard in 2019, which is simplifying it in one way, but you're going to be spending the whole season hearing about C1, C2 and C3. Lucky old you. And it is going to be a phenomenal season in prospect, where the Vettel can pick it back up and return to the level that we saw, maybe not last year, but maybe in his dominant seasons in 2011 and 2013, where he was just, when he was comfortable with that car, absolutely unmatchable. And so the minimum laps done out there today, coming from Sergio Perez, and Perez has 30 laps to his name. The maximum, Sebastian Vettel with 169 laps to his name. We've got the review show coming up in a few moments' time to recap everything that's happened. And right at the end of the day, the man who provided us drama at the start provides us drama at the end. Kimi Räikkönen brought out the red flag at the very start when he got down to turn 5. First moments of the morning, and at the very end he is pulled over to the side of the racetrack to bring out the yellow flags. And less than a minute to go, and the red flag is out. Race control have had enough. Well, not actual race control, because we're in race control in the commentary box. We're not up in the grandstand like we normally would be. And so Kimi Räikkönen, a spin to start the day, and at the end, pulling over to the side of the circuit. And it's been an entertaining opening day of the testing. So this is what we've had across the day. Green light at the end of the pit lane. That was the moment I was speaking about for Kimi Räikkönen earlier on. He wasn't the last person to have a moment, though. This was Romain Grosjean finding the gravel, but this time escaping on one of his 169 tours. Sebastian Vettel going round. And this was at turn 15. The Haas of Grosjean having a fuel pressure problem, it was reported. There was a minor issue in the afternoon for Carlos Sainz, but Mclaren were able to diagnose it and improve. Max Verstappen going off as he chased lap time as well as logging the data. Little bit of gravel, but it was a fairly uneventful session, apart from cars maybe getting in each other's way, which certainly happened with the Toro Rosso of Kvyat and Lewis Hamilton. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a phenomenal day in terms of finally seeing those cars out on the circuit. And Sebastian Vettel, the fastest driver on the first day of the season, ahead of Carlos Sainz. Romain Grosjean was third, ahead of Max Verstappen. Kimi Räikkönen was fifth with those incidents at the start and finish of the day. Daniel Kvyat sixth, Sergio Perez in seventh, Valtteri Bottas was eighth, ahead of Lewis Hamilton in ninth. Hülkenberg was 10th, and the last runner today was Daniel Ricciardo. The other drivers will get a go apart from Kubica and George Russell, who will have to wait until Wednesday. Coming up now on Sky, we have a chance to review the day for the next hour. Thank you very much for joining us, and join us again tomorrow when we're going to do it all over again.
How long? Welcome to F1 in 2019, and welcome to the paddock here in Barcelona. The running has just finished out on track, and it's like the first day of school. There are some people in different uniforms, of course, and joining me now to discuss everything that's gone on here in Barcelona today at the Circuit de Catalunya. Very pleased to say Karun Chandok is back with us on Sky F1.
Hello, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, and Mr. David Croft also joins us.
Hello. Nice
How
to
are
see
you?
you taking your gloves off. It's not that cold down here, Rachel.
It is, and it's going to get really cold.
You've still
I
gone for the
realised
full
that-
winter coat, I see, though.
Oh yeah, the hood will be up by the end. I did have one glove on, the other one I can't swipe on my
Fair
iPad,
enough.
so I've had to take them both off. Right, Karun, how was your winter? Little addition to the family.
With kids when the first 3 months is full on, but yeah, it's been fun, and yeah, looking forward to a good season ahead, because I think there's lots of stories to talk about this season. Obviously the battle of the front, Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, but there's so many subplots, so yeah, really looking forward to the year ahead.
You've come for some sleep, haven't you? Be honest.
Yeah, don't tell my wife that.
And how was your winter, Crofty? How did you winter, as they say?
Well, I spent the first part of the winter with a few thousand darts fans at Ali Pali, and then a few more thousand motorsport fans at the NEC with Karun.
Do you do the dancing of the darts? You know, to do the whole thing.
Not in this coat, I can barely move. But yeah, we try. We have a few celebrations in the commentary box, and went to Race of Champions, and that started to whet my appetite a little bit for testing. And here we are today in the sunshine, and seeing a Ferrari car just looking every way, shape and form how Sebastian Vettel dreamt it would be when he went to sleep on Christmas Eve and said, "Santa, can I have something nice this year, please?"
Yes, he must have been a very good boy. We'll get on to that very soon. But look at this paddock backdrop behind us, because you can see everyone. They're gathering outside Red Bull to talk to Max Verstappen, because he's been out in the car today, all the way down the paddock. They'll be doing the interviews, and we'll be putting those into the show as well as we go on. So make sure you stay to hear from the drivers today. Let's start, though, with the defending champions. Let's start with the world champions. Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri both out on track today. We're going to show you just some shots of Lewis out on track, but what were your first impressions of the car today?
I think today was a solid day for Mercedes. I think they weren't looking for out-and-out performance. You know, I went to watch it in a few different corners. The car clearly looked heavy. They were clearly focusing on long runs and reliability and making sure that today is all about validation and correlation for them, which are, frankly, words which sound quite dull for anyone who's looking to see.
Exciting, come on.
Yeah, for anyone who's looking to see, who's the fastest car. But today wasn't about having the fastest car. Today was about proving that what they designed in CF.
you.